Disclosure of pecuniary interest, please. Councillor Lemon?
Yes, Your Worship. That particular letter pertains to the delegation that is here, and I'm wondering if it should not, if it should all be grouped together with the delegations that are here pertaining to that station.
That's fine, and it will be. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Lemon.
Thank you.
Any disclosures? No? Seeing none? Confirmation of the minutes, please, from September 23rd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adair, that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on October 7th, 2013 as printed be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Confirmation of the minutes, please. Oh, we've done that. Resolution moving council into committee of the whole.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Twaddle, that City Council now move into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We're now in committee of the whole. We don't have any public meetings this evening. We do have 3 deputations, and I will invite Mindy Gill, Curator of Collections, and Diane Folds, Community Outreach Coordinator from the Owen Sound Museums, and this is with regards to an event honoring our local veterans. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay.
Just turn your microphone on, Mindy.
There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so.
You're right on that.
Just want to run the slideshow. There we go. All right, so it's that time of year again. This time it is our 13th annual Honoring Our Local Veterans ceremony. So it's going to be taking place on October the 20th, and the doors are going to open at 1 p.m. and the ceremony will begin at 1:30. So this program has been honoring local veterans from Grey and Bruce counties, and it's held at the Royal Canadian Legion Branch Number 6 here in Owen Sound. And we're also recognizing the 60th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice. And we have a special guest speaker, Brigadier General John Hayter. And there will be a special presentation by the Royal Canadian Legion Color Party. And of course, the reception as well will pay tribute to this year's honorees as well as all veterans. And the refreshments will be provided by the Ladies Auxiliary of Branch Number 6. So, here are just some shots of our veterans that we've honored in the past. We have their plaques that we set up for them, and then we unveil them one by one as we reveal a little bit about each veteran and the stories that they were willing to share with us. So it commemorates all veterans and educates our youth as well as others about the accomplishments of the veterans of Grey and Bruce County. So it's capturing that bit of history so we have it to share with future generations. Over the last 12 years, we've honored over 100 veterans, and actually I did my tally with this year's 13. We're up to 116 veterans that have been honored since we began the program. So it involves researching, interviewing, creating the plaques, and then displaying that information about their military and personal lives, their careers and their accomplishments. And we've started actually displaying these plaques out in the public, so we'll find a venue so that everyone will be able to come and see them. And as I said, it's on October 20th, and we invite the public to come to the ceremony. Because we hold it at the Legion, it holds well over 300 people, so as many people can come. At the very first ceremony, there were 50 people, and last year in attendance, again, as I just said, there was well over 300. So it just seems to be growing. This year, actually, we have 13 veterans. There's a bit of a mix-up. Jack Thompson and William Thompson are actually the same man. He just sent us 2 surveys. So this year we'll be honoring Tony Gardner, Donald MacIssac, Charles Mann, Harold Martin, Fern McFadden, Alphonse Meyer, Jack Patterson, Jim Patton, Terrence Penton, Charles Stevens, John Stevens, William Jack Thompson, and Lloyd Wilcox. And these are all veterans, as I said, from the Bruce and Grey County area. And they're sponsored this year by the Royal Canadian Legion and the Ladies Auxiliary Legion, as well as Seasons. and the Community Foundation. And this year as well, we have a special presentation following the ceremony up at Greenwood Cemetery. The grave sites for, the gravestones for Billy Bishop and David Vivian Curry have recently just been redone by the, let me just find their name, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. So we're going to be having a special guest speaker as well, David C. Kettle, CMM, DD, Brigadier General retired, speaking on behalf of that. So that'll be 3 p.m. following the ceremony up at Greenwood Cemetery. And again, we invite the public to come and help us rededicate these important grave sites as well. Okay. And so we'd just like to thank the many volunteers who've contributed their time to the event. So the City of Owen Sound, Tourism, and Community Culture Museums Operating Grant, Veterans Affairs, the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors Program, and as I said, the Community Foundations. So there you go. And be sure to stop by the Billy Bishop Home and Museum and discover your history and heritage in Owen Sound. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions, comments from council? What time does this begin?
Doors open at 1, and then the ceremony begins at 1:30.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing as many people there as we can. I'd like to let the members of the public that are in the council chamber know this evening that there are monitors outside in the foyer, just outside the council chamber, and in the main hall, that if you get tired of standing, I think there's a little extra seating out there, and you can actually see everything that's happening as it happens. So we're wired for sound tonight. Moving along, we have 2 more deputations. I'll invite Richard Thomas, the chair of the Community Waterfront Centre Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. This all began with the board of Owen Sound Museums. The city reduced the amount of money it would contribute to the museums, and the board responded by closing a museum. They did not raise funds, they did not create partnerships, and they did not hold a public meeting. A lot has been said since your last council meeting about the Owen Sound Museums Board's willingness to cooperate and negotiate, so I'd like to comment on those 2 issues first. In terms of cooperation, I can tell you that from the first moment the Community Waterfront Centre was created, our relationship with the Owen Sound Museums Board has been adversarial. The day after this council agreed to extend its RFP to the end of this year, the Community Waterfront Centre received a cease and desist letter from the Owen Sound Museums Board aimed at protecting the museum brand. We were also asked not to call our group Friends of the Marine Rail Museum, as the OSM Board didn't want to appear as though they supported our efforts. Our first meeting with the chair of the Owen Sound Museums Board was so hostile that my co-chair Jeff Robbins and I left feeling that not only was this board not interested in helping to save the Marine and Rail Museum, but also it seemed likely that it would work to undermine our efforts. We were told in no uncertain terms that Owen Sound Museums Board was under no obligation to give us even a single artifact.
Excuse me, Mr. Thomas, are we getting to the part where you're updating us?
Yep, we sure are.
Okay.
That theme continued at our only meeting with the full Owen Sound Museums Board. I was told that if the Community Waterfront Centre was successful with its RFP, we would be receiving an empty building. The Marine and Rail collection would be removed. Our next contact with the board of the Owen Sound Museums came 2 weeks ago, right here in this council chamber, when it was announced publicly that it would keep the museum open by using the resources of the Community Waterfront Centre. I wasn't as surprised as some people, having already dealt with this board. The biggest problem is that their assumption that support for keeping the Marine and Rail Museum on the waterfront is support for the Owen Sound Museums Board. It is not. Owen Sound Museums Board has stated publicly that it is the board with the know-how to run the Marine and Rail Museum. Well, if that were true, I would not be standing here right now. A few days after your last meeting, while the Owen Sound Museums Board was preaching cooperation and negotiation publicly, our key funder and the organization holding our funds received a letter from the chair of the Owen Sound Museums Board warning them that if there were financial irregularities with the accounts of the Community Waterfront Centre, they, the Owen Sound Museums Board, were in no way involved with our organization. The mayor, thank you, organized a meeting of representatives of the two boards last Tuesday, mediated by Councillor Penton. Thank you very much for your help. Some brief discussion was held at that meeting, but absolutely no agreements were reached, despite media reports to the contrary. And that sums up the relationship that the Community Waterfront Centre has with the Owen Sound Museums Board. The Owen Sound Museums Board does not want to negotiate, it wants to dictate. And the stick it carries is the heritage of this community. So let's talk a little bit about that. The Owen Sound Museums Board has repeatedly made it clear that it owns the artifacts in the Marine and Rail Museum. They would rather give them away than let any other group take responsibility for them. This is the threat that we have been operating under since we began, and I'll just draw your attention to the comments of the Vice Chair of the Museums Board, who issued the same threat in this room 2 weeks ago, and this is a direct quote. "We understand that the city has an RFP out for the building, and we intend to file our own RFP, asking for exactly the same terms that we already enjoy in regards to the occupation of the building. If council selects another proposal, as it is entitled to do so, we will remove the museum collection as expeditiously as possible in order for the building to be made ready for the new tenant." In other words, if this council chooses to accept another proposal, the Owen Sound Museums Board will disperse the Marine and Rail collection. The heritage of an entire community will be gone because this board is so desperate to prove itself right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Community Waterfront Centre and the Ministry of Culture have a slightly different view of the concept of ownership of artifacts. The Ministry of Culture says a community's heritage is part of its identity. As a steward of the community's heritage, the museum is actively engaged in the community and responsive to its needs. It is our belief that the artifacts presently in the Marine Rail Museum belong to the citizens of Owen Sound. They are held in trust by the Owen Sound Museums Board. They are not owned by it in the way that one owns a used car. On paper, it is considered that some group must be responsible for the collection, in the same way the Library Board is the owner of the books held in trust for the community, and the Thompson Art Gallery Board is the owner of a wonderful collection of art. If either of those organizations ran into financial difficulty, would we allow those community assets to be gotten rid of? I think not. Tonight you have a motion before you to remove the RFP for the historic CN station. I ask you to leave the RFP in place. When you agreed to the extension, you made a commitment to the community to allow this process to take place. Now, I'll be right up front to you. Our vision for change is not yet complete. We've been operating under the assumption that we had until December 30th to complete our proposal, but I can give you a sense of where we are heading. On September 15th, we held a day-long visioning session at the Harmony Centre. It began with a 2-hour talk by Andrew Armitage, who many of you will know has spent the last 15 years working with his late partner Lorraine Brown on museum development. He also knows a little bit about local history. Andrew told us that the problems facing the Marine and Rail Museum are problems that face every small museum in Canada. The expense of employing staff is a major financial burden, and over the past number of years, more and more museums have been moving towards recognizing local heritage in ways that do not require full-time staff. He said a lot more, but the upshot was pretty clear. Across the country, communities are finding ways to celebrate their heritage without spending a fortune. Our goal has always been to create something sustainable that includes the historic CN station and the Marine and Rail collection. But Andrew's talk got us dreaming even bigger. Imagine the museum as the harbor and the harbor as the museum. Imagine the entire waterfront celebrating not just marine and rail heritage, but Owen Sound's significant role in the development of this nation. Imagine it as a sustainable and long-term attraction, one that creates interest and activity on the waterfront and draws people from around the world. It is possible. And I don't mind telling you that when we started researching the cost of heritage interpretation, Andrew offered to help the Community Waterfront Centre to develop a heritage interpretation concept for the entire Inner Harbour at no cost to us. And that is a value somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000. This is the direction that CWC is headed, ladies and gentlemen. If you cancel your RFP tonight, this is the dream that will be canceled along with it. But more than that, you will be bringing to an end the enthusiasm and support that the Community Waterfront Centre has been able to bring to this discussion about creating a sustainable model for the future of Owen Sound's marine and rail collection. And if you do that, ladies and gentlemen, well, why would anyone volunteer to do anything in this community ever again? In addition to asking you to keep the RFP in place, I am also asking tonight that Council take a leadership role in these discussions. Community assets held by a publicly funded group such as the Owen Sound Museums Board are too precious to be used in the way they have been using them against us since they started this entire process. This Council provides our tax dollars to Owen Sound Museums. You have a fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers of this community to ensure that the money is being used for the purpose that it has been provided, the protection and preservation of community assets. Further than that, you have a moral responsibility. The Owen Sound Museums Board would rather get rid of our heritage than let any other group take responsibility. As elected representatives, you are the stewards of this entire community. The future is up to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Thomas. We appreciate your update. We're going to move along to the next deputation.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Our next deputation is changed. Tom
Yes, Your
Denholm
Worship.
is here. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Owen Sound Museums Board of Directors.
Thank you. The clerk's office was advised that
Thank
I'm replacing Dr. Totten this evening. Your Worship, through you to members of council and the audience here and at home. Thank you for receiving this deputation from the Owen Sound Museums Board on the motion to rescind the request for proposals, or RFP, with respect to the former CN train station. The board's goal is to preserve our local marine, industrial, and rail heritage for the community within the financial constraints placed upon us. As our Vice Chair, Dave Alexander, said at your last council meeting, it has been our intention to submit a proposal in response to the RFP. However, the more we examined the RFP and considered its meaning, the more concerned we became about its effects on Owen Sound's culture and heritage. Tonight we are seeking clear answers about the RFP as we move forward. As we see it, this is not primarily a discussion between community groups as to how to run a museum. This is about where the collection at the Marine and Rail Museum may end up in a few short months. The future of the museum collection is the source of our concern regarding the RFP. If Council votes to approve the motion to rescind the RFP this evening, the museum and its collection will stay in the old CN train station for as long as the people of Owen Sound want it to be there. We hope for generations to come. Without an RFP, the artifacts remain in that charming old building on the waterfront, and various groups and individuals will be involved in their preservation. However, if the RFP is not rescinded tonight, and if any reasonable business proposal for the use of the CN train station is received by City Hall before the end of the year, then a working majority on City Council has signaled that it is prepared to remove the museum from the station. Given a choice, City Council will lease the station to a business to pay rent early in the new year. Some of those in the audience may not have realized this. I wish to advise Council and those watching tonight that if the museum is evicted from the CN station at the end of the year because a rent-paying business is awarded a lease on the property, the board of the Owen Sound Museums will look for an existing museum or museums with paid curatorial staff able to take the Marine and Rail Museum collection. We believe it is important to let the public know what will happen as far ahead of time as possible. To reiterate, if Council chooses to rescind the RFP, that is, if councillors vote yes to the motion, there is a 100% certainty that the Marine and Rail Museum collection will stay in the old train station on the waterfront now and into the future. But if councillors vote no on the motion, That is, if they vote to keep the RFP alive until the end of the year, and any reasonable business proposal for the use of the station is received by City Council, then it is likely that the museum collection will be gone from the city in early 2014. It would assist us and the residents of the city who care about culture and heritage if, before voting, Council would clarify the meaning of the RFP and whether individual councillors support evicting the museum from the old CN train station at the end of this year if a reasonable business proposal is received for the premises. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Are there any questions from members of council?
Thank you very much for that presentation, and I'll take questions. Councillor Lemon, is this for Mr. Denholm?
Well, I think to expedite what's going on, the first presenter was not given an opportunity for questions, and Mr. Denholm has been given that. I believe we have to treat everybody in equity, and the other thing is I would suggest at the conclusion of this presentation we bring forward the proposal to cancel the RFP and then have that discussion. I have some comments, but the first thing is I think both gentlemen should be given an opportunity to answer questions. And the first question I have got for you, Mr. Denholm, is this. You've been very, very careful in your choice of words. You haven't mentioned if the RFP that is successful should come from the Community Waterfront Centre to operate a museum board. Are you suggesting if that is the case, then all the artifacts which are the property of the citizens of Owen Sound, and I reflect on the fact that it's a matter of stewardship that is your role, legally, yeah, you can do that through a way of doing it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the thing that should be done. My question, to be very, very clear, that if the winning proposal happens to be from the Community Waterfront Centre group, would you then remove the artifacts from the museum?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Lemon, I'm speaking to the effects of the vote on the RFP tonight. And what I'm trying to say is if you vote to keep the RFP alive, one of two things is likely to happen, and both of them are not good. One of them is that a working majority of City Council finds someone to pay rent, $2,000, $3,000 a month. They find a tenant, it brings money into the coffers of the city, and in January, the museum is evicted. What else could happen? There is no other place for the collection to go in this city. Grey Roots isn't far, but there wouldn't be a place in the city. No, that's only one option. The other option is to send whoever's involved in putting in an RFP, let's say on the museum side of things, and to take whatever animosity I've heard tonight and just deepen it to the point where cooperation becomes absolutely impossible. And then at the end of this year, this council, with its museum's expertise, will decide that this museum proposal is better than that museum proposal. And one person on this council is a member of the board of one of the organizations. Let's say it comes down to these two. It's a hopelessly compromised situation. It is a conflict of interest. So that's one option. The other option is evicting the museum. Both of them are horrible. So this council is considering extending the RFP, and two outcomes are both lousy. And what is the other option, if I may, is to cancel the RFP. We promise that museum is staying in the station for good. We will do whatever it takes to continue saying, please assist us, please work with us, but the museum's not going anywhere. So why is that not a better option and allowing time to heal whatever wounds are here than the other two options I told you about, which are both horrible? Any city council, if you wrote this out and considered that a city council in this situation would extend the RFP, you'd have to say everybody in the dais is nuts.
Well,
Your
that is
Worship,
arguable.
Your
And-
Worship, I'm a point of order.
And what is that?
The suggestion has been made that I am in a conflict of interest. Sir, if you look under the Conflict of Interest Act, I caution you to remove that, because under the Conflict of Interest Act, I must have a pecuniary interest. I have not received any money, any benefits in any way, shape, or form from being involved in wanting to save a museum at the time when it was going to be closed. You did not answer my question. You danced around like on the head of a pin, the angels or whatever.
Okay, Councillor.
Just a second. My point,
it up.
I am wrapping it up, Your Worship. My point is, you did not answer the question, that if a competent organization with a competent plan came forward, you would still X the museum, all the assets out of there. And sir, I'm sorry, that is disingenuous.
This is a chance for me to clarify what my colleague Dave Alexander said. Because 2 weeks ago, he said that if council insisted, we would submit an RFP. Basically, we were saying we would be bound by whatever process council said it wanted. We assumed at the time that we would have the cooperation, maybe it was a ridiculous hope, that we would have some cooperation from anyone else in the community wanting to save the museum, and that there would be a single proposal against business proposals, because there had been discussion about businesses going in there and paying rent. And I know that there are members of this council who are thinking, that's the best option. So our thinking was, humbly, to say, if you really want us to submit a proposal on behalf of the museum against business submissions, we'll do it. That was the entire meaning of our co-chair's submission. And I've heard it over these past 2 weeks blown up. I'm not a media person in this town, but I've heard it grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and I've been shocked. Because the aim was always to submit a proposal, if council really wanted one, to compete against other businesses that we assume would be stepping forward and bidding for the space in the museum. So we wanted to be open and submit to whatever process council wanted.
Thank you very much for your response, and I'll ask Mr. Thomas if you would just come back up to the podium. I think members of council may have a question. Failing that, I would suggest that council member may want to bring forward the motions that were given as notices and deal with those in short order. Any questions for Councillor Adair? Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Thomas? Thank you for your time. I want to remind everyone on council that all the people involved in these community groups, we're very grateful for the volunteer time. All of these folks are volunteers, and I think as volunteers, each and every person deserves a huge amount of gratitude from the community for stepping up to the plate and often providing leadership in contentious issues like this that have really, unfortunately, come to this rather unfortunate crossroads. It reminds me somewhat of a custody battle. And I think of a mother and a father and a child and a custody battle. In this case, the child is the collection. And with that in mind, I still maintain that the best solution is the groups coming together to put in a dynamic, joint proposal that could create something very exciting, very unique, and very dynamic down in that particular building. Having said that, I'll go to Councillor Adair. He would like to bring forward his notice of motion, which is item 12E1. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. There seems to be a lack of clarity over what's going on here and what the RFP is. we have a letter from the Chamber of Commerce that we received today that I think clarifies quite a bit of it. It says, it's about businesses that put in RFPs. They know that it is an expense, it's a time-consuming commitment, but that it needs to be an open and honest process. So when the museum told us last fall, almost a year ago, that they were closing, Council unanimously, that is all 9 of us, agreed to that, reluctantly, but we had unanimously for the last 3 years, all 9 of us, had been cutting their budget. So in March of this year, we did that all over again and said, you know what, we're going to have an empty building there. We better issue an RFP to put something in that building. We did not issue an RFP to have someone manage a museum. That was not our RFP saying, this group's going to manage it or that's group. Who has the best group to manage it? The RFP was to put something in that building, an empty building that we're going to have in January. There's been an awful lot of confusion in the public. There's been an awful lot of rhetoric. There's been an awful lot of electioneering that's been going on. And I think that this council needs to be clear about what the RFP process is. If it is a fair and open process and we are taking all bidders, then I think we need to let the CWC know that that is the process. That at the end of the day, if there is a better proposal, that we are honor bound to take that. If it's council's intention that regardless of what other proposals we receive, we are only going to accept a proposal from the CWC, then I think we need to have that conversation tonight and decide that that's what we're going to do and put the public process aside and simply enter into an agreement with the CWC to operate out of that building. Those I see are our 2 options tonight. Should these 2 groups come together, that would be excellent, but you know, sometimes people just don't get along, and we can wish all we want that they will, but that doesn't happen. So I'm quite prepared to withdraw my motion tonight, but I would like some clarity from council on whether we've presupposed that the CWC has a leg up, and that's completely unfair to, as the Chamber of Commerce said, businesses that put in the expense and time-consuming commitment to go forward, or in fact, if we're having an open RFP process and the one that we have outlined and that we've sent out to businesses in this community and said, this is the RFP process. If I withdraw my motion, then this is the RFP process that we continue on. If council wants to change that RFP process, tonight's probably the best time to do that and not let this issue just continue to fester, and fester it has. So I'm quite prepared to withdraw my motion if council could have some discussion about whether or not it's this RFP process or something else, because it's unfair to both the CWC and any businesses that wish to participate if there's a presupposition about what this council is going to do when we see the RFPs. And I think there's been quite a bit of confusion in the public, and I would like a little bit of clarity.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Adair. I'm going to go to the city manager on the details. Some of the language that's used in the request for proposal, I know there's some language on, I've made a note actually on page 3 of the proposal RFP that speaks to specific uses at that particular site. So if I could just ask you to give council some of the highlights of the RFP proponents.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council through to the audience. The city is seeking proposals to lease a facility consistent with the direction to lease it to the best proposal, to look at alternative uses for the existing property that enhance and contribute to the development of the harbor and waterfront. Council is prepared to consider proposals for the lease of this property and, if necessary, seek changes to municipal property sale bylaw for leases over 21 years. And further to that, if I could just identify the evaluation criteria that are in the RFP. So we're giving a maximum score of 10 points for neighborhood impact, and how complementary is the proposed uses and activities with the neighborhood. A maximum score of 10 points for interpretation and programming that enhances and communicates the marine and rail heritage of Owen Sound. A maximum score of 20 points for intended uses and programming that enhances the mandate of the harbor and downtown master plan by attracting people to the waterfront and allowing them to enjoy the building, green space, and area. And a maximum of 25 points for length of lease and other non-lease rate-specific terms and condition. For example, offer of percentage of gross, capital improvements, renewal clauses, city improvements, and a maximum score of 35 points related to financial offered for the lease, i.e. proponents with the highest lease rate offered for a minimum of 5 years will be given full percentage rating for these criteria, and then the nearest highest and all others submitting will be given rating based on the percentage difference to the highest price. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman and then Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Worship. There's been a lot of discussion tonight. Let's talk about the positives. The positives are that we've got literally hundreds of people, many of them here tonight, either side of the issue, all concerned about our marine heritage, our marine and rail heritage. That is an incredible feat if you step back and think about it. Not very many issues do we get hundreds of people consistently interested, be it any topic. So that is a positive. The other thing we need to talk about is that everybody here are volunteers. I'm sure right now many of you are thinking, I wonder why you ever stuck your hand up to volunteer in the first place. I'm sure none of you signed up for this type of fighting. Some of the key words that came out of both deputations tonight, and in my mind are the only ones, and I echo the mayor's comments, the only way this is going to work is through cooperation. We cannot have two groups, both interested in basically the same thing, at loggerheads. That won't work. You both need each other. That's the only way it will work. There has to be cooperation. There has to be a partnership. There has to be an agreement. Otherwise, how can it work? How can it work long-term? And remember, that's what we need to be thinking about, not just 6 months. We need to be thinking about 6 years. We need all hands on deck. I think about, it appears there's some animosity here. Is there mediation? Is there conciliation to try and bring the groups together? In my mind, that's the only way that this can go forward. They talked about, Mr. Denholm's, 2 museum proposals, and we picked the winning museum proposal. Good. My goodness, I can't imagine how could we do that? We need them to come together. There needs to be a single museum proposal that comes forward with all hands on deck, as I said earlier. So, those are my comments. I still think there's lots of time for the groups to come together to try and work it out. And so for that reason, Councillor Adair, you asked some specific questions. I do hope that you withdraw your motion. And the reason I hope for that is because I think it buys more time for these groups to come together. They both need each other. More importantly, they think the community needs them to come together. And while that is difficult, there's been hard feelings on both sides. That's what needs to happen for the community. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's one question that I have. Has council ever passed a motion saying we're going to close the tourism office at the CN station? Because the request for proposals does not deal with that. I don't remember, maybe we did, pass a distinct motion saying we were going to relocate tourism to City Hall. And if so, when did we pass it?
With the city manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Lemon. There was a report done which spoke to the closing of the museum as well as the tourism office and relocating it to City Hall, and that was passed by council well over a year ago.
Yes, that's what I'm aware of, but if the museum stays there, to me, sober second thoughts perhaps, but I really believe that if the museum stays there, keeping the tourism office there is a natural mix, because tourism should be on the water. And so I guess I'm going to have to make a notice of motion at some point to revisit that. The other question I've got is, on the weekend, I had the opportunity to talk to a former city manager, Craig Curtis, who was in town for an Association of Ontario Municipalities meeting. And I asked Craig about, because he was city manager at the time when the two boards, there were separate boards. There was a Marine Rail Board and there was the Billy Bishop Board. And they were two separate entities, and the decision was made under his tenure, and the request was made by the Museums Board to join as one. His recommendation, which I think has a lot of merit, that there be an operating board at Marine Rail, which would be responsible for raising funds and what was going on there. There'd be an operating board at Billy Bishop, which would be responsible for what goes on there and what functions it performs. And there'd be a joint board for some of the accounting functions and things like that, some of the management functions, made up of two representatives of each museum, and I guess a fifth person, and that might be someone they appoint, or it may be someone city council appoints. And that was turned down at the time, and in retrospect, I feel part of the problem exists because the two museums are very, very different types of museums. One is very focused on the industrial, commercial heritage of this community as it reports to the marine and rail functions, which is why we're here. The other honors a very, very great Canadian, Billy Bishop. And having sat on the original, or people who originated that, I really feel that the intent when it started was not to have a board, it was to have the two boards because of the separate interests. And I'm wondering if some compromise, as was suggested by Mr. Curtis when he was city manager and rejected at that time, might be a way of bringing peace and harmony with everyone working together, which is, I think that's what people would like. I think that's what the community wants and needs. And that's the thing that's going to make this museum successful. So I'm letting people know that that was the interest that Mr. Curtis expressed, and he gave very strong support for a healthy marine rail museum. And I think that is the way to go, and I think that's the way we should be heading.
Well, some valid points there, Councillor Lemon. Certainly anything is possible, and I think it's always healthy to look at new management models at all institutions and agencies that the city's involved with. So certainly some very good comments there. We're going to Councillor Penton and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to both groups that came and made deputations. In a way, I think this is a community conversation that's at the crucial stage. Crucial conversations are when the stakes are high and when emotions run high. And I think that's what we have this evening with the deputations. And I'd like to just really echo what Councillor McManaman was saying and the Mayor was saying, is that we do need our community to come together to preserve our heritage, to celebrate our heritage, to bring people here to our community. We need people to be able to work together, to get over bad starts, to focus on the common ground, even when it's really difficult. And for that reason, I would also support Councillor Adair withdrawing his motion to give these two groups the time they need to work out whatever it is that's going to work best for them to accomplish the goals and the common ground that they can already see. As they mentioned, we did have an earlier meeting, and there is common ground between the groups, but there was also a very difficult and problematic start. But I would really encourage you to do that so that we could have a proposal that's going to really honor the expertise and the opportunity that both of these groups bring to our community. So I'd really encourage that and encourage Councillor Adair to rescind his motion.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. I'm wondering if I could ask the question of Mr. Thomas. Would that be allowed?
I think in the situation, that would be a good idea.
Well, we heard...
Mr. Thomas, would you?
We heard from one delegation that they understand the RFP. I'm asking you, do you understand the RFP?
Yes, we've had a copy of the RFP since day one.
Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to ask. I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
that you will withdraw your request. There seems to be an understanding of what the RFP calls for.
Thank you. Any other members of council wishing? Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I'd like to say that I hope that the motion to withdraw the RFP will go forward. I think that maybe will now. Yesterday I was in a very loving place at a church where they did pray for us to make the right choices tonight. And one of the things they said was they hoped that we'd build a museum where love can dwell and all can safely enjoy, and built of hopes and dreams and visions, and where love shall end divisions. And I thought I'd just like to say that because I personally would like to do anything I can to help make this happen in this community. And I think our whole community, our whole council would like to support the two groups and make this happen as best we can.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Worship. I'm quite satisfied that at this point everyone knows what the RFP is about. It's not about a museum, it's about a building. The terms and conditions are there. We have an understanding that everyone knows what they mean, that we know what they mean. Hope that the community wants a copy. It's out there. I'm quite happy to withdraw my motion.
Okay, that motion has been withdrawn. And I'll ask at this time if there's any subsequent motions that any member of council would like to put forward on this particular topic. Okay. We are at public question period. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question of this council? Yes, please come up to the podium, and if you could just say your name and your address for the clerk, please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Hi, Vicky.
My name is Vicki Tischborn, and my address is 780 7th Street A East. And my question is to do with another hot button topic, but, you know, let's not get all excited. It's to do with the transit plans. And the question is, as the three-route system has been decided, can the public be assured that they will be able to provide meaningful input into the planned routes, and will City Council and staff listen to what people recommend and try hard to incorporate those changes and suggestions? And then there's a little second question. And can a good, solid, and timely communication strategy be part of the next phase, please?
And your answer to both of those is absolutely yes. And if you would remain here, our Director of Operations is going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation to exactly respond to those questions.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we will. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Any other members of the public for a question to this council? Going once? Questions? Okay. Councillor McManaman.
Worship, it would it be appropriate to bring Mr. McRoberts' report forward right now?
Absolutely. Councillor Adair.
I think it would be more appropriate at this time to bring forward Councillor Purdon's motion in regards to the bus terminal, as that discussion may be more germane to the following presentation by Mr. Roberts. I think that we should deal with Councillor Purdon's motion first.
We'll hear from Mr. McRoberts, and immediately following, Councillor Penton, I'm sure, would bring forward her motion at that time. Thank you for that. Mr. McRoberts, if you'd like to do your
Your
PowerPoint
worship, there is a notice of motion
presentation.
as well that has precedent.
Yes, yeah. We'll deal with that as well. I'll decide one. That's right. No, exactly. Okay, Mr. McRoberts, everybody's pretty quiet on the exit, so we
Okay.
might as well keep rolling.
started?
Yeah.
Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to provide this presentation today. My presentation today is to speak about our consultation process with respect to the three-route system for the Owen Sound Transit System. Quickly, just to outline the agenda with respect to the presentation tonight, we'll talk about some of the timeline constraints that are present with respect to the three-route system. We'll identify some informal public comment and input opportunities. We'll speak about a more formal process of gathering comments and input with respect to the three-route system, which could include, or would include, an online survey, a public meeting process, so people can actually speak to this specific issue, a communication and notice process. So I'll go through each of those items on the agenda. Public consultation and final approval is required by late November 2013. The reason for this is that the period from December to March is required for us to be able to provide updated brochures, improved and replaced signages if council so chooses, looking at shelter relocations if necessary or as required, shelter construction as necessary or as required, and most importantly, communication about what those changes might mean. One of the things that we've identified is that it's possible for us to construct a website that would allow public to provide comments and post comments. This isn't meant to be a blog or any type of a social media site. This is meant simply for people to post their comment and leave it there posted, and everybody will have an opportunity to see what comments are being posted, as well as staff will be able to pull that information down and use it in the consultation process when we look at a three-route system. The comments that we're looking for are to be specific about the three-route system. Staff will also create an online survey, which public can participate and provide information related to questions pertaining to the three-route system. So there might be questions about what would be more important to you with respect to a three-route system in terms of types of service, shelter locations, things like that. Public meeting process. Stage 1. A public meeting will be held on October 28th, 2013. The meeting will be located at the Bayshore Community Centre from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 p.m. in the evening. The meeting will be facilitated by the city manager. The tentative agenda at this point in time for that meeting is an overview by myself to basically provide some of the issues with respect to constraints that we have with operating a three-route system, and provide some background so that we can set the stage and the platform for a consultation process. We also are looking to have our accessibility considerations identified and reviewed by Heather Elston, who is our AODA consultant. As part of this is we want this to be an interactive process so that the participants, the public, the ridership, has an opportunity to basically provide feedback and direct information to the group. We're looking at breaking out into discussion groups that will be facilitated by senior staff. We'll have interactive identifications of key origins, linkages, and destinations. This process will also be facilitated by the city manager. And of course, once that process is complete, we'll have a brief presentation about next steps. Stage 2 of the public meeting process. Staff will review, summarize, and analyze the information that we've gathered so far. So that again will be from the public website where they can post public comments, the online survey, and the first stage of the public consultation process. At this point in time, we believe it's important for us to consult with First Student, who's our operator. As they are familiar with transit systems, they will provide good information and good feedback as to what can be considered and what are some of the further constraints that might be presented. Staff will also have to basically identify and create route options and the information related to those route options. Stage 3 of the public meeting consultation process will be meetings held at November 12th, 2013, a location still to be determined. Again, same time, 3 to 6 p.m. Again, facilitated by the city manager. And the tentative agenda for that meeting will be to summarize comments received, including the informal public comment webpage, formal written comments, online survey, and comments and information obtained through the Stage 1 public meeting. There'll be a presentation with respect to route options. We'll talk about bus shelters and prioritized locations and the types. We'll receive further public comment, and again, we'll identify what the next steps will be. Stage 4 of the public meeting process. Staff will review, summarize, and analyze the public comment and feedback. Then we'll bring a report back to Council on December 2nd, 2013, with again a summary of that public comment and feedback, a recommended route option, and a recommended shelter location and prioritization. Lastly, but not leastly, and most importantly, we'll have to discuss communications and notice. Once the final decision is made by Council, the following steps will be required. We'll need to put public notice via media releases, social media, website, newspapers, posters, etc. We need to update the brochures. We'll need to update or consider updating the signage for the bus stops. Certainly we'll need to maybe relocate some of them. Some of them, as Councillor Adair has asked for a report to come forward to speak about what information could be put on those signs, and we'll bring forward a report prior to that time. Relocation and construction of shelters as required. And of course, formal implementation of the route system. But most importantly, once we've done that, we need to monitor. We need to monitor how the route system's working, and if there's changes that need to be made, that needs to be brought back to Council and identified and suggested changes being made. That's the most important about any process that we go through, is we need to make sure that we monitor the process after the fact. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Well, I looked with interest on your presentation, but there is a fallacy within it. A large number of the people who use transit do not have computer access. And I think we're missing a key link here. We're relying on social media, and social media is good. Lots of people do use it. I do use it. But there are many people in the community, for whatever reason, cannot use it or do not use it.
Councillor Lemon, you're absolutely right, and maybe Mr. McRoberts, you could just repeat the dates of the public meetings and the opportunities for people to actually come to the meetings.
Your Worship,
particularly if they don't have computers.
I'm going to be suggesting that we also need some initiatives. I don't know exactly how, but we've got to get the message out before the public meeting so that people have a chance to think about it and to input. This is a really major deficiency, and I think there's a way of doing it, but I wasn't privy to exactly what you were going to say, but I think we have to reach the people who don't have computers and don't have social media access.
And that is certainly a priority.
And it's the second part of this.
Okay, let it go.
The other part of it is, I find it really interesting, the city has an accessibility committee, which under the Act is empowered to make decisions on policies relating to signs and shelters, et cetera, for any person who is, for the community. That's in the legislation. But I find it very interesting that the accessibility consultant we've hired will not be meeting till next month with the accessibility committee here in the city. And how do we rationalize that out? Because a lot of this is accessibility to the transit system for the people who use it.
That's a question? Do you have an answer
Not
tonight?
specific-
or-
It's not specific about the consultant with the AODA, but.
We'll go to the city manager.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, through the Councillor Lemon. I think they are somewhat separate issues, but we certainly brought this draft agenda here tonight for you to provide your thoughts and input and comments on it. So happy to have that discussion. On the issue of the Accessibility Committee, unfortunately, I think that is a very separate issue, and perhaps we could deal with that after we've had your thoughts and comments on the agenda proposed for the transit meeting.
Okay, that wraps up my two questions. One of the things, I have a couple suggestions on how you can reach the people that doesn't involve social media that you could start inexpensively.
That would be helpful. Councillor Lemon, that would be very helpful if you could provide Mr. McRoberts perhaps with an email with some of those ideas. Those suggestions, I'm sure, would be taken under consideration. I mean, we do want the riders to know what's going on. That's the point. And I think any way we can get the message through is worth doing.
Well, there is a way that we can do it inexpensively, and I've actually had time enough now to have thought of it. And it's very simply this, that on the buses, we put forms, allow people to fill in the information, because that's where you're going to run into people who use transit.
Sure.
And there be a box on the bus where they can receive those forms. And that way, the people who are actually using the system and know the most about it can comment easily and have time at home to work out their answers. And I think that's the way you do it. And I don't think we need a motion of direction, but that's my idea and concept. And I think it's very, very doable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your presentation, Mr.
Thank you.
McRoberts. A couple more councillors, and you can certainly return to your chair for some questions. Councillor Adair and then Councillor Penton.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is almost the process that I had envisioned over a month and a half ago, and we're very close, I think. 3 to 6. The last meeting that was, public meeting that was held on this issue by the Operations Committee ended at 6 o'clock with all of the riders fleeing from the room to catch the last bus home. This is a meeting for the riders, and I think that if we can move it back even half an hour from 2:30 to 5:30, so that people do not feel rushed and going, the bus is coming. I mean, at the Operations Committee meeting in which we talked about buses, there were announcements, well, the bus is coming in 5 minutes, the bus is coming in 10 minutes. We cannot have people running out of this meeting. So if it can be pushed back half an hour, 2:30 to 3:30, or 2:30 to 5:30, I would feel a little more comfortable that we are trying to actively engage our riders. Certainly, surveys on the buses, as I had suggested 2 weeks ago, are an excellent idea, and I hope that you guys take that into consideration moving forward. And I think that, other than that, I'm glad I was looking for that sort of going back once more to the public and saying, okay, we've heard your comments, here's what the 3-route system looks like. Are there any more suggestions? Was fundamental to what I was thinking, and I see that has been captured in here. It is a very tight timeline, but we can't implement the three-route system if we don't have the bus shelters in the right places when we do it. That all has to follow along, and that everything has to be ready. And everyone needs to know what's happening. We need to have all the signage. There's still a lot of work that we haven't completely addressed tonight on the signage, where people call. All of those questions still need to be answered, but they all need to be firmly in place before we switch over. So if we can make that, I don't know if I need to make that a motion that we move everything back half an hour, but I think it's very important that
Staff's indicating they'll take that under direction. Councillor Adair?
That's great. I think that's very important to make this work. And I think that's, other than to thank staff for putting this together in a fairly quick time, I would suggest that the people who come to the meeting, there's a lot of work to do once they get to that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Adair. I'm just going to go back to Mr. McRoberts, and I think some people might be wanting to write down these dates, and the dates, if you could, please, and the times for the public consultations.
Yes, Your Worship. The dates for the public consultation would be October 28th, and as Councillor Adair identified, the time will be from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. It'll be at the Bayshore Community Centre. The second public meeting will be on November 12th. It will be from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. as well, and that location will be determined and be posted appropriately.
Thanks very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Adair and then the City Manager.
Posted appropriately, as in a poster on the buses saying there's a public meeting at this time at this place. Okay, I'm good.
Okay. City Manager.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I didn't want any councillor to feel that they didn't have input on things as very critical as the actual dates. We looked at when rooms were available at the Bayshore, but clearly it is our preference that all of council be able to attend, and we're not able to ascertain that without actually asking you that question. So I guess I would ask if you could ask your council, are all of you able to attend on those two dates?
I'm seeing heads nodding affirmatively. We'll be there. Thank you. Councillor Penton and then Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, thanks very much for the plan. I just had a few comments. One was at the front end, when we're looking for more nuanced information in that information gathering, where you're talking about doing an online survey, or the idea of having the online survey also in a hard copy form in the bus is a great one. But another way of getting more input is to hold some specific focus groups with people, smaller groups, 8 to 10 people who can talk in more detail. So that's just a methodology that works very, very well. And to do some key informants, where you just have an interview format with people who have a lot of expertise. That might be bus drivers, or it might be people who have used the transit system for many years and seen many changes. So those are just some comments on trying to get at the front end. And I think it's important with this also to make sure that we're talking to the people who are least likely to be able to come out to a meeting, a public meeting. So when you have meetings between 2:30 and 5:30, that's when most children are coming home from school. So if you're a single mom with children who uses the bus, it might be very, very difficult to come to a public meeting. So that might be an idea to, if you're going to do some focus groups or key informants, to try and talk to some of those people so that you're sure that you at least have some of those people represented in your collection of data. And the other is in terms of the communication. I think we need a really solid communication plan from today on, not just afterwards when we have the information and we're taking it out, certainly then, But from now on, the public has to be aware not only of when the meetings are, but how they can get involved if they can't get to a meeting, so that, you know, people know. And we're reaching out with the information to the public, not just waiting for them to read it in a paper or assume that they will see it somewhere. That we're working really hard as a community to engage, so wherever possible. So those are my comments.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I'll just follow up on that. I was thinking of for the location of the second one on November the 12th, the Legion might be a reasonable location, if we could look at that. And maybe that meeting could be at a different time of day. So those are just my 2 thoughts on that.
Sure. Councillor Lemon.
Oh, yes, Your Worship. I'm going to suggest something which is, I'm quite sure, doable because it's paved. There are many people who use the public transit system who have access mobility issues. Many are unspecialized, but many use the public transit, including people in wheelchairs. And I would request that on the day of the meetings at the Bay Shore, that the bus not stop out on the street, but come right into the Bay Shore to make it accessible, and that's an accessibility thing, and I think under the intent of the new legislation, ODA, that's probably not a bad idea. The other thing in terms of calculating our loading on our system, the article that bus or cab fares are going up to $9 is going to have, from the calls I've had today, and there were a number of them, it's going to have a really great impact on the people who have to use the bus system. And if we decide and find a way to keep the bus depot open, wouldn't it be wonderful to actually have somebody down there where people who are getting on and off the bus can talk to them? I think that is a way to reach people face on face.
Okay, moving along, Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we only have one opportunity to do this right and to make it happen correctly. So the input, I think, is quite important, and even such minor things as moving the time, I think, are important to get this right the first time. Councillor Penton talked about particular, how to reach particular groups, and I do hate the word stakeholder, but there are other groups in the community that I think we should probably attempt to reach out to if we're not already catching them. Groups like Community Living, CNIB, Georgian College, those kind of groups, and maybe that's where we do the kind of interview process, or at least make them aware of you know, and I understand the interview part, that's big, but at least make them aware of what we are doing and the kind of input that we're looking for, and they can respond accordingly to however they want to participate in the process. But I think reaching out to those specific groups, and I'm sure there's lots of others that we can think of, is also important.
Sure. Okay, City Manager.
Council, I guess I'm going to have to turn to you. This meeting's on October 28th. I know that Mr. McRoberts has a lot of other things on his plate. I know that I have other things on my plate, and we will make our best efforts, but it's really going to be up to all of us to talk to those in our community and get a full understanding of this. I can't tell you that I'm going to be able to contact every interest group in the city, because I will ultimately fail to catch them all. We will do best efforts. Everyone knows where my office is. Everybody, I hope, knows that they can reach me. But can I commit to saying that I'm going to ride the buses, that I'm going to contact all those groups? I can't. And I'll be that open and upfront about it. And quite frankly, I can't commit my city engineer to that either. So council, I would urge all of you to be the ambassadors to your residents and get out and talk to those people and be prepared to speak to what they say to you at those meetings.
Seems pretty reasonable. The next speaker is Councillor Boddy.
Thank you. Most of what I was going to say, I think, just got covered by Councillor Adair. Mr. McRoberts, implementation, when do you think it would start with the three-route system? Are we still looking at April or earlier, or?
Certainly, through your worship, certainly that's our intention, is to have that same time frame. That's why we're setting the time frames that we have. That's what's been negotiated in the contract with First Student, is to have that time frame of the transition over to the three-route system by April 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Penton.
Thank you to the city manager for pointing out the realities and the limitations of information gathering. It wasn't my intent with those suggestions to kind of throw that all over to the staff. But if there was a question route that would keep information gathering consistent with all of us, then that would be really helpful, because we don't want to just bring all kinds of information back. We have very specific information that we need from people. So if we had something like that, I'd be happy to help in that department.
And certainly the dialogue with the community is important, and as we arrive at these decisions, we want to hear what you're thinking, and we want to know what you're thinking, and it's a change, and the change is, it's difficult. But you know something? I think at the end of the day, I'm really confident that we'll be fine. We're going to have buses, you're going to be able to get around on a 30-minute schedule, and we're still going to have Saturday service, but it is going to be different, okay? But we'll figure it out. We have a little ways to go, and we will figure it out. Any other speakers to this particular issue? I'll have to ask the clerk where we're at. I've gone off my chart here. That would be good. Motion to receive the report, item 12B14. Thank you, Councillor Adair. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Lemon, did you want to bring forward your motion?
Yes, Your Worship.
Your notice of motion.
My notice of motion, that we now move forward to review the report from staff respecting the Owen Sound Transit Terminal temporary operating costs, and then reconsider the decision made to note and file the report. The reason I did this was because I wasn't happy with how it happened. And since then, my fellow councillor here is going to make a motion pertaining to requests for proposals. I was approached, and other people have been approached, about the possibilities of keeping the terminal open while it's in use for other purposes and operating a business out of it at the same time. The other thing is, and the reason why I want this to come forward is, I want a wholesome discussion on this, and also to give the people who are drafting the three-route system, they then have the option that perhaps we can still have a terminal and a three-route bus system, because that option, I think, is actually doable and will work better.
Okay. The notice of motion is to review the report from staff respecting the Owen Sound Transit Terminal temporary operating costs, and then reconsider the decision made to note and file the report. Councillor Adair, if you'd like to, I would suggest that we call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is defeated. Councillor Penton.
Yes, as a follow-up to our last meeting, I have a motion that we issue an RFP for the use of the terminal. But in the meantime, that City Council agreed to open the transit terminal to the public until the end of March, when the new three-route system would come into being. And that if in the meantime we have a new user of the terminal, that they would agree until the end of March, or until as long as that four-route system is still in operation, that they would allow the public to use the washrooms and the building. So that's the motion. I would speak to that motion I think we have heard overwhelmingly from the public how important the terminal is to the people who use the transit system, in particular with the 4-route system that we have in place now that's going to be in place until most likely the beginning of April. The 1st of April, I think, is the planned date to change to the 3-route system. And as long as we have a 4-route system that depends on people getting on and off buses at the terminal, I think we have an obligation to our citizens to make that building available to them so that they can get out of the cold of the winter and use the washroom facilities. So that's the reason behind it, this motion. I know that there is funding available until the end of December in the budget to keep the terminal open. Hopefully by then we'd have a new tenant in that building if we issued an RFP now, and we wouldn't be losing money. But even so, I think it's the right thing to do to keep the terminal open until we have the new system in place.
I'm going to go to the clerk to be sure that there's some clarity on the motion.
It's a compound motion. Do you want to split and vote on the RFP and then vote on keeping the terminal open until April? Or do you want those two to be together in one motion?
I think I'd like them together.
Okay.
Councillor Adair?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting this motion. Over the last couple of weeks, it's been quite clear to me that we, whoever that is, has done a really, really poor job of communicating to our riders what's going on with the system that they use every day. As I brought up at our last meeting, we know where they are. They're on the buses. We made a whole lot of decisions in June. We sat down as a council. We had the public meeting. We sat down at the council, and we made a host of decisions. Councillor Lemon and myself and others voted to close the terminal, regardless of whether we had a 2-route, a 4-route, a 3-route system. Councillor Lemon's motion to reduce Saturday service was accepted by council. We talked about what kind of a proposal we were going to put out with 3 buses, 3 routes, 4 routes. We own the bus, they own the bus. There was a whole lot of discussion. None of that was communicated to those who were most interested in what we were doing. So I think we need to take a pause, a deep breath. We do have the money in the budget to keep the terminal open until the end of the year and move forward. And I think with what we have done tonight, just earlier with the consultation process towards the 3-route system, that we can rebuild some of that trust that has been lost because of the lack of communication that I think, are all culpable in. People are very angry. I think they have a right to be angry. Certainly, as people yelled at me, I've never said, you don't have a right to be angry. They were angry. I think we need to help people to downgrade that anger back to passion for public transportation in Owen Sound. And I think what Councillor Penton has suggested is at this time probably our best route forward to re-engage our riders and get down to the work at hand of making the 3-route system something that we can all buy into. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and when we implement that 3-route system, and we need the riders on board, pardon the pun, to make that happen. And at this point, I think this is the best way. We set the clock back a couple of weeks, take a deep breath, and move forward. So I will be supporting Councillor Penton's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to ask Councillor Penton to separate those into 2 distinct motions, and my thinking is this. RFPs are a request to enter into a contract, and I'm not sure we as a council, all of us, really understand what it means and the whole process. I think we've got two different, slightly different issues. I think probably by the time we vote, we're going to end up in the same place anyway. But an RFP mixed in with a motion to keep the terminal open presently really muddies the water. It's very hard when we come back to discuss it later what was the decision. Frankly, I think that was a problem with our June 17th decision, is that we're requesting an RFP on a 3-route or a 4-route system, both of them without terminal, voted by, well, we know who voted for it. We don't need to get into that. I think there's confusion there, and I think we really need to separate those and have a discussion so we understand what we're requesting separate from that other decision about what we're doing with the terminal, because they are slightly different things. It's up to you, but that was before you'd actually said you weren't going to separate them. That was what I was going to say.
Are you suggesting a friendly amendment to that effect?
It's up to Councillor Penton, quite obviously.
Yeah,
I am.
I'll go to Councillor Penton to comment on that friendly amendment proposal.
While I understand your reasoning here, and it is perhaps putting two things together, I think if we do put the two things together, we have an opportunity of achieving both ends. That's my sense. So I'll just leave the motion the way it is.
Okay. Okay, Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate this opportunity to speak publicly about this whole issue. Councillor Adair mentioned that we've made a host of decisions, and I want to just step back from that for a minute and discuss that. All of those decisions were made with, there's been numerous reports or discussion that council's living in a vacuum. The council made those decisions without any consultation, without any, I'm not sure if anybody knows, but we've had numerous public meetings, public opportunities for people to come forward and talk to us about the transit system. I think we all learned a lot through that. I think all of us learned how essential the transit system was to certain people in our community. Mm-hmm. But what we also talked about was we all knew that the transit system couldn't continue the way it was financially. So decisions needed to be made. So on one side, it's an essential service to a lot of people in our community. The other side, responsible financial decisions needed to be made. Through those, we had an entire council meeting where we just talked about transit. We had a public meeting at the Bay Shore that was well attended, 40 or so people there. The council meeting, there was probably 30 people at it. We had numerous operations committee meetings where, not as many as that, but there were certainly dozens of people attending those meetings. Lots of feedback and emails and surveys. What we heard overwhelmingly was the 30-minute service was the key, one of the key factors, the key factor. They didn't want 45-minute service. They didn't want hour service. That was too much of a cut. That was too much of a change for those riders. We also heard they wanted Saturday service. They didn't want Saturday service removed. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to step back from these and discuss these points because people seem to have looked at the terminal decision in isolation of all those other decisions. 30-minute service was agreed to by this council. Saturday service was agreed to by this council to be kept. Even the 3-route system, I know there's people that are opposed to it. It's a change, as you've said. But the 3-route system, most people, those meetings, and I stand, you know, I'm generalizing here, were open to the idea to see how it would work, how it could work. So I think it's important, the terminal decision, we don't have to close the terminal, but you can't change that whole decision without then revisiting all the rest of it, because changes needed to be made. So nobody is glad that the terminal's closing, but in looking at it on the balance of things, compared to some of those other decisions, this was the lesser of all the evils, I would say, at least in my opinion. This motion by Councillor Penton, I too will support it for the simple fact I think we need to move forward on this. We cannot, as a community and as a council, continue to be infighting over this decision. We need to move forward. We need to make a clear direction to our staff that a 3-route system is moving forward. that is the decision, and that's where we're going. I think it's important to note, under a three-route system, the buses would not be returning to one central spot. Despite what's been said, the whole plan is not to have them. That's how you can have a three-route system and gain the minutes needed to still cover a large area. So I can support this motion in the hope that it will bring the community and council together and actually have an engagement on October 28th and November 12th for everybody to work together to find a solution that works for the riders and is financially responsible to the entire community. So those are my comments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the city manager and then Councillor Lemon.
So I'm in the position of trying to understand what we're being asked to implement for you. And keeping the bus terminal open, the previous report had two options. One was that we staff it, and one was that we simply open the doors and clean it. And I guess I need to know what the direction of council is on that particular issue. And then I want to just speak to the RFP if I could for a moment.
I'm going to go to the mover of the motion for a little background on this, and then I'll go to Councillor Lemon.
Mm-hmm. The recommendation from staff in terms of keeping the terminal open was to staff it. There was a recommendation not to just open it without staffing it, so that would be what I would be proposing. Can I speak to my other point now?
Sure.
Okay. I agree with Councillor McManaman in fact that we need to come together as a council also and move forward, and that was also the intent of this motion. I think people who've been following this know that I was one of the people who really held out for the 4-route system. That wasn't successful. Now that the decision's been made, we'll have a 3-route system. I will support that. The decision was also to close the terminal at the end of March, and I do support that. I know it's going to be a big change for everyone, but I'm encouraged with the notion that the new 3-route system doesn't depend on a terminal. It's a system where people transfer from bus to bus at different intersecting points, and that's why it's so important to have people to come out to tell us where should those intersecting points be, where people most likely will go from one bus to another if they're not all going back to a central spot. So my greatest concern is just having a building that's sitting there while people are still all congregating to catch their bus at the terminal, and that we can leave that terminal and have it staffed and open. But in the meantime, look for a permanent tenant for that building.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to interject at this point.
Thanks.
First of all, designing bus routes is a highly technical thing. You can make them accomplish a lot of different things. The 3-route system that we saw initially, I hope is going to go right out the window because it's not going to work. I can tell you why. Somebody who's coming from the East Hill, let's say Malibu Iron Hill area, if they want to go to the medical center, it takes 3 buses to get there under the system that was envisioned in that report. If I want to go to the Bay Shore to a public meeting by bus, which I've done, I'm going to have to take 3 buses. I'm hoping that we're going to go in with this with an open approach. I'm not happy about the 3-route system, like a lot of others, but I lost the vote, that's fine. But when you're designing the 3-route system, please have the courtesy to the people of Owen Sound to approach it with a completely open mind, that if it's possible to do it with a common meeting point, they are not mutually exclusive events. This is how it's being presented. You can't have a terminal and 30-minute service. I've been involved with transit for quite a few years as a councillor, and years ago I worked with a former employee, and we eliminated 1 bus from the system without any loss in service. because we looked at it with an open concept. If you're predisposed, you're not going to have a common meeting point, you won't have one. If you look at an open concept, maybe it won't work, but at least in the name of justice, look at it. That's point number one. Point number two on this issue of the terminal. I have today gotten a number of calls from people because the garbage there has not been dumped in some period of time, and a whole bunch of other problems are occurring as it now is. I support the councillor's motion because having somebody there will ensure that the inside of the terminal is not damaged by some person with the wrong attitude towards life. And I think that works a lot better. But the other thing to think about it, if we keep that terminal open as I think it's going to happen tonight, let's do some surveying there. You've got the perfect location. That's where people right now go to, and then you could, all you need is a table, and the person who's there could do the surveys with people and find out what the people really think. This is a perfect opportunity to improve what we've done. So please vote for this motion, and please, when you're designing the three-route system, because I think I know what you're going to hear from a lot of the people. They want a common meeting place for a number of reasons, and one of them is safety and sanitation and health.
Thank you, Councillor Lemon. I'm going to go to the city manager, and I'm going to ask if there are some comments, please, too, from staff in terms of the contract with First Canada. Councillor Boddy mentioned contracts, and we're now into a contract. I'm not sure how we would ever go about undoing anything at this point, but I do think it would be a very costly process if we were to even remotely entertain doing that. So, Councillor Corsi, you go to city manager. You really got up.
I can assure you I was not elected by the residents of this city. First, now I've lost. First of all, I will remind council that at our first meeting, a public meeting that we're going to have, we're not talking about routes at all. We're just information gathering on a number of key things that we need to know, such as where you need to get to, where you need to start from. So we're not going to routes in that meeting at all. And this is everyone's opportunity to find solutions. It's not me, it's not Mr. McRoberts, it's council, it's the writers, it's everyone working together. So those two meetings, to be successful, that's exactly what has to happen, is everyone coming together to find solutions. Did want to comment on that. On the issue of the RFP, because I would ask for consideration that you send us back to staff for a full report back. Because I am in the back of my mind thinking it could be an RFP for both a lease and or a sale. So I'm not sure the city needs this property, but I think it may, but you need to have that discussion. So I would prefer if we could have the RFP matter referred to staff for a full report back, if that would be acceptable.
Point of clarification, Your Worship.
Councillor Lemon, yes.
Have we checked, I happened to be around when it was built, and when it was built, there was a large amount of provincial money went into it. Are we under any obligation to, if we do sell it, to refund and not use it as a terminal? Are we in a position where we would have to refund any of the money to the MTO?
Councillor Lemon, that is certainly something that I'm sure will be covered off in the report. I think it's a good point. Councillor Penton, this was your motion, so I will go to you.
I'm delighted to have staff do a report on the RFP process, because I was really terrified that someone's going to say, what do you want in the RFP? And I would not be able to answer that question. So that is a great suggestion, and I don't know if I need to change the motion. We could still go ahead with an RFP process, but before doing that, we need a report from staff.
If it could be referred to staff for a full report, that would be good direction.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. We have a couple more speakers. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. It seems to me, I believe First Student has hired all of our bus drivers with the exception of one.
Yes.
And not one has retired. Is that right? I think it is. I understand that they have also hired other staff that we had down at the bus station, and they're going to do some dispatching for them. Have we asked First Student if they would put that dispatcher in that bus station to work, or put a staff person down there to work until such time as our 3 routes took effect and we changed our station? That's my first question. My second question would be Grey Coach. It seems to me I heard that Grey Coach offered to put a staff person in there too. I don't know if that's a tale or if there's any truth behind that story. I'd like to know about that. I also wonder about the hours of keeping that bus station open. I think I certainly support that bus station being open until we have our routes established and know where we're going, and until we get our bus shelters up so that people have somewhere to get out of the inclement weather. But these are some questions, and I also think some things that we could think about upon opening that terminal or keeping that terminal open. Perhaps I could have some questions. The other thing is, I'm awfully happy that we're getting a report on the RFP, because I could see us getting into quite a muddle again with an RFP process. Thank you.
I'm going to go to the city manager for some response to the
Thank you,
questions.
Worship, through to Councillor Wright. Because we have just entered into a contract with the provider, we did not want to enter into any other discussions with them because that contract is binding at this point. And we've had no other real offers to man that facility on a volunteer or other basis.
Perhaps that would be not a staffing direction or a staff question of the operator, but a political one.
Sure. I can respond to that. There has been discussions with Greyhound. There has been no indication from them at this point that they would like to take on that role.
What about First Student? Have you talked to them?
No, simply because we just entered the contract with them.
Well, then if they're watching TV tonight, they'll get the message, won't they?
They're certainly well informed. Councillor Boddy.
Thank you. Speaking to the motion, then, when we looked at starting off with a 3-route, 4-route system, we chose 3-route after sending out the request for proposal. I'll come back to the request for proposal in a minute. It came back and we decided that we would extend for 4 months, or 6 months, sorry, with the 4-route system. And at that moment, we really didn't vote or make a decision on what we were doing with the terminal. We just assumed that it's still going to close. But when we made the decision about the terminal, it was when we thought we were starting with the 3-route system. So, you know, we erred. It went past us too quickly. Given that there's going to be buses driving through the terminal property, it makes sense that we have the doors open somehow. It just doesn't make sense that we'd be using the property and not have them open. Going back to the request for proposal, when we put out a request for a proposal or for tender, we are making an offer. When somebody responds to it, whether they end up with a contract or not, we had 2 people that responded, and that puts us into a binding agreement with the 2 people that put in proposals. So the law looks at contract A, contract B. Contract A being our request for proposal or tender, and the proposals coming in. When we request a 3-route or a 4-route system without a terminal, then we decide later, after we've hired the person, being in this case First Student, we can't go back then and say, okay, now we want you to manage our terminal, we want you to put somebody in, because not only does it put us in breach the contract that we've entered into with them now, it also puts us into a breach of contract with anyone else that put in a proposal, such as Miller's, or I think there was another company that was late. We're playing with fire when we start fooling around with that type of stuff after putting out a request for proposal. If we withdraw our request for proposal, withdraw our tender before we choose, before the applications come in, or the applications don't meet our demand, we've got some freedom there. But once we move ahead, we have to be very careful that we're starting to change the rules of what it was that we asked for, the proposal, and what we got. I think probably we're okay here. I'm not giving legal advice because you're not paying me a big enough retainer, and I've got to be very careful about this. In my opinion, my opinion given to myself as I was thinking through this is that given that we cannot and should not go back to first student to provide the staff, given that we're going to be providing staff on our own, I don't think we're probably in trouble, but we could be. It's a very slippery slope, and I think we've got to be really careful when we do requests for proposals that we play through with them. We don't change our mind after the fact and put ourselves in jeopardy. There's lots of case law out there on companies and people that have changed their mind, have changed things a little bit after the fact, and they get into big trouble and it costs them a lot, and I don't think we want to go there. I will be supporting the motion, given that we should have made that decision when we decided to extend the 4 route for another 6 months.
Okay, I'm going to go to the clerk just to read the motion, and then we'll call the question.
The motion as I have it, and you can clarify if I'm incorrect, is that City Council directs staff to provide a report respecting a request for proposals for the city's bus terminal building, and further that City Council resolves to keep the terminal building open with staff until the new 3-route system is in place on April 1st, 2014.
Okay, everybody clear on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have made decisions tonight. Thank you very much for coming, and please show up for the public meetings. Does council want a brief recess at this time, or would you like to just soldier on? Soldier on, okay. All right, thank you. We are at 11A. We have 2 items of correspondence. Councillor Lemon is just leaving, but the Owen Sound Chamber letter and the letter from Sylvia Jones, MPP. Councillor Wright.
The letter from Sylvia Jones, I think, I just motion to receive because I think it should go to the county.
Okay. Just Councillor McManaman.
If I might, could it also go to our Operations Committee just for further review?
If they want to, but it's sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So the motion is to send the letter from MPP Jones to the Operations Committee for discussion and comment back to council. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have a letter from the Owen Sound Chamber. Motion to receive would be in order. Councillor McManaman?
Motion to receive.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a lengthy consent agenda, not as lengthy as some, but we do have new businesses opening up as well. Items 12A, 1 through 8. It's council's direction on this. Councillor Penton.
Move acceptance of the consent agenda, and congratulations to the new businesses.
Certainly. Discussion. Councillor McManaman?
Just a question about the library board minutes, if I might, to one of the councillors on there. It discusses from the June minutes about the carpet being removed and the library being closed for 9 days, and that, I don't think, that these were the June minutes, so I guess I'm asking for an update on, or maybe staff. Someone could update.
Councillor Adair.
The only update that I have is that it's going to happen. I'm not sure the exact dates, but there will be quite a bit of stuff posted at the library, letting patrons know that in order to replace the carpet, the library will be closed for, we're hoping it's not 9 days, but that does seem to be what the contractor has said. So there will be lots of notice in the library to say that it's going to be closed. It's an unfortunate event, but the carpet is, well, it's actually a health and safety issue. That's pure and simple. That's the only reason if we could have done something else, we would have, but it was a tripping hazard throughout the entire area of the library. So there will be lots of notice in the library that it will be closed for those days. But I can't tell you that it's October or whatever, but it will happen.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to the city manager.
We'll try and get more complete information and pass that on to council.
Sure. Thank you. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a series of reports. Our first report is a joint report from the Manager of Elections, a familiar face around these parts, they say, and our City Clerk. This is on a vote counting method for the 2014 municipal election, and we do have a PowerPoint presentation this evening, and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for letting me speak briefly to the report, and through you to members of council and to members of the public that are at home. I'm hoping to provide a brief overview of the report for your convenience, and I then want to hand it over to somebody that we've brought in to help understand some of the technology that we're proposing. And my colleague, who you just were mentioning, old friends, Glenn, is going to be able to field any questions that council may have. Council has previously given direction to use a paper ballot system for the municipal election in 2014. And further to that direction, Glenn and I have spent a number of months looking into the opportunities available to us regarding options around vote counting within a paper ballot system. There are three options. One is a manual count, one is a central tabulator count, and one is a poll tabulator count. In the manual count, election workers run polling stations, and then they remain after the close of polls, and they count the ballots that have been cast at that location. That information is then sent to City Hall, double-checked, and the final results are tallied. With a central tabulator system, election workers continue to run the polling locations during the day, but at the close of polls, all of the ballots at each of those locations are returned to City Hall. They are then fed through tabulator equipment, which reads each of the ballots and then tallies the results. With a poll tabulator method, voters mark their ballots and then cast them through a tabulator that is located at the location where they are voting. The tabulator reads their ballot as it is being cast. The results are tallied after the close of polls and then combined for final results. All three of the methods that we've looked at provide for a supervised vote, which was important to council. It includes attending at a polling station, providing identification before voting, and in all three of these, the results are not available until after the polls close for the day. In our report, we did a summary chart, and I'm going to just walk through that briefly with you, and then I'll turn the mic over to our guest. What Glenn and I did in order to break down our research was choose 6 criteria that we would evaluate these 3 methods with. And what we've come up with after talking with a number of our comparator municipalities is that a poll tabulator vote counting method is optimal for the City of Owen Sound. With respect to the number of staff, the manual count will require us to keep the largest number of staff at approximately 180. 150 of these are hired for the day and 30 are city staff. It is a very large amount of people for us to have to recruit and train. We know that a number of other municipalities have had difficulty getting this number of people or the number of people that they need for their municipality, and that has prompted a move away from the manual count process. With respect to central tabulator, it's slightly fewer than a manual count. We need the same number of people to work the polling stations during the day, but we have a smaller complement back at City Hall that are organizing and feeding the ballots through the tabulator system. The poll tabulator method offers us the opportunity to work with the smallest staff. We think approximately 100 workers will be necessary, and that includes our city staff. If we're able to keep the 30 that we've used in the past on the manual count, we're looking at recruiting less than half than we would have to with a manual count system. And we're feeling confident that that's a manageable number for us to recruit and train to put out in the polling stations with a very good sense of what they need to do that day. Looking at labor intensiveness, the manual count is definitely the highest for city staff, and that includes the staff in the clerk's department, the HR department, and the accounts payable department. It will run across other departments, but those are the 3 that are the most affected with respect to training, recruiting, managing the payments out to, and then just generally managing that staff. The election workers themselves also have a more labor-intensive day under the manual count process because they have to remain longer. They do the day at the polls, and then they stay and count the votes. And there's a lot more paperwork involved in their day because they're going to have to reconcile all of the ballot counting that they do. With respect to central tabulators, it's still quite high in terms of labor intensiveness because we have the same number of people that we need to recruit and manage. Sorry, I should go back and also mention that for both manual count and central tabulator, we need to try and find 20 polling locations, and I'll be speaking to that under accessibility. It's a slightly lower level of labor intensity for the people working at the polls because at the end of the day, the ballots are returned. For the people that are managing the election, we do have the logistics of getting all of those ballots back to City Hall organized and tabulated. So it's not as seamless as the poll tabulator, which gives us fewer staff that we need to manage. We are able to use computer logins at the polls rather than a paper process, which means that we have less paper that we have to deal with, and the computer login lets us manage the voter list much more seamlessly and interactively so we can keep it up to date. Closer to the end of the time when we need that information available at the election stations. The on-site tabulation also creates the most efficient process because the results are read into the system to be tabulated as soon as the polls close at 8 o'clock. With respect to risk of error, we looked into this and did some research. We found some research that has identified that the human error related to the vote count maxes out at around 2%, which doesn't sound like a great deal, but with our elector base of 18,000 people, if we look at a 50% turnout, we're looking at 9,000. That can be 180 vote count disparity in a particular race. I'm not suggesting that that is the case, but we do know that there are rates of error that are related to manual counting. The other thing that we found that we looked at is that with the manual count and the central tabulator, we don't have the ability for voters to review their ballots. And we know that we're providing complex ballots. They have 3 or 4 races they need to look at. There's potential for a plebiscite or a question to be asked in this coming election. So there's a lot of information we'll be asking from them. It is easy for an elector to mistakenly fill something out, and therefore we're not actually capturing their intent. If we have the option to ask them or to find out from the machine that there could be a problem with their intent and ask them if that is their intent, then we're getting a more accurate result, election result in the end. So we don't have that ability for review under the manual count, and we also don't have it under the central tabulator count. With the poll tabulator, and I'll let our guests speak more to this, we don't have any human error in the count because we know that the machine is doing the counting. We don't have to transport the ballots back to City Hall, which is a concern that we have in terms of errors being able to arise with the central tabulator system. And we do have the ability to have a ballot review to capture voter intent if we find that the machine is indicating that either they've missed a contest and haven't voted for anyone, they've overvoted, or they've put marks on the ballot in a place that will make it difficult for us to discern what their intent was with that vote. Moving on to accessibility, with respect to the manual count, it is difficult for us to get 20 accessible locations. It has been difficult for us in the past, and in the last 4 years, the security provisions at our schools have changed. And when we're looking for a location, we're looking for a location that is convenient in terms of its geographic location in the city. We're looking for ample parking, and we're looking for accessibility. There are only a certain number of buildings that meet all of those criteria. Schools were a great option. With the security provisions that have been put in place, we just received a bulletin from AMCTO reminding clerks to think about the fact that those security provisions really reduce our ability to use schools. So it reduces our assets available to us to select locations from. It gives us a limited ability to have independent voting for people who can't navigate a paper ballot alone because they don't have the option to use some of the features that a machine gives them. And again, I'll let our guests speak to that. With the central tabulator, we are still looking at 20 locations, so we have those issues. We do have accessible voting options, but the system would only be available at our advance polls. It wouldn't be available on the day because the tabulator equipment would be back at City Hall on Election Day. With a poll tabulator, we would be looking at only 5 locations. We have given you a map and checked out 4 locations that we believe meet the quadrants of the city. and I can just go to that very briefly for you. We believe that we should use a 5th location downtown so that we are being as convenient as possible. We have been to those 4 locations. We have not yet been with a member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that's something that we would want to do. But with our initial look, these 4 locations are highly accessible. We know from recent material that's come through council that the First Christian Reformed Church is actually right now undergoing a site redevelopment, and that's specifically to include an elevator and accessible washrooms. So we're excited about these locations, and we think that they give us great accessibility for our voters. Cost, it is going to be less for the manual count in 2014. It looks like it will come in at approximately $99,000. But in 2018, it will bump up to $106,000. And that is without us taking into account that we haven't increased how much we are paying our election staff. And if we continue on, we're going to have an increased problem in getting those staff. So if we do stay with the manual count, if not this year, in 2018, we're going to have to bump our fees, and that's going to bump our budget. In 2014, for the central tabulator, we've been advised through the Municipality of London that we should be looking at approximately the same budget as a poll tabulator. So we've used our poll tabulator budget, which comes in at around $117,000. However, as we move forward into 2018, we're looking at a reduction to $99,000, and we believe that we can continue to find efficiencies. So what we've done is give the most conservative estimate. With the increases we would need for a manual count or central tabulator system for payment to our workers, and looking at reductions that we could add in 2018 to the poll tabulator with respect to not having to buy barcode scanners and not having to reproduce the materials that we'll create this year, we think that those budget numbers will actually have a greater disparity. We've given you the most conservative estimate. Finally, on the timing of results, with our manual count, it has traditionally been 11 p.m. or later, and that's dependent on the skill of our vote counters. We do know, looking in the past, that we have frequently had polls reporting after 12 o'clock. With the central tabulator, it is completely dependent on the number of tabulators that we employ. But if we had 2 tabulators and a backup system, we know that we probably wouldn't get the results in. Looking at the tabulators pulling in between 1,000 and 2,000 ballots in an hour, we're looking at probably at least 4 hours before we can start reporting back. With the poll tabulator, we are feeling confident that 9:30 would be our estimated latest time. We would be getting those memory cards in. At 8 o'clock, we would start tabulating the results from our specialty polls. As the results came in from our 5 locations, we would be feeding those into our results tally computer. Here in chamber, you would see the results come from the specialty polls, and then polls 1 through 5, and the combined would have your final results in. And there's a full audit trail with that, which I'll also let our guests speak to. So before I turn the mic over, the reason that we brought a guest in is because in talking about suggesting poll tabulator equipment, we know that while it's not new to the municipal sector, it would be new for our staff, it would be new for council, and it would be new for our electors. And so we thought it would be valuable for council and the people at home to have somebody speak to how the vote tabulator equipment works. John McKinstry is somebody we've been speaking to throughout this research process. He works for Dominion, and he's agreed to come and join us this evening and to give us a PowerPoint on this technology. So I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you so much, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm good, thanks. Okay, well, hi, I'm John McKinstry. I'm an account representative at Dominion Voting Systems. And we're a Canadian company. We're based in Toronto. And I've been talking to the clerk's department about the possibility of putting poll tabulators here in the city next year. So they asked me to come up and just talk about the process. One thing about the process is it's not new. We have about 1,200 customers across Canada, the United States, internationally. We have about 100,000 of the machines that I'm proposing for the city in operation around the world right now. So this is not new technology. It's been around for quite a while. As far as the voters concerned, nothing is different. They get a paper ballot, they get a marking pen, they go off in the corner, they mark a target position beside each of the candidates' names. They put the ballot in a secrecy folder and they walk up to the machine, which is sitting up on top of a ballot box, just like that. That's our standard Canadian cardboard ballot box. The only difference for them, you would usually have a city staff member standing next to the machine, and in front of the voter, they take the ballot, it's in the secrecy folder, insert it into the machine, it draws it out of the folder, scans it in about 5 seconds, and drops it in the ballot box. Then the voter walks away. So as far as the voter's concerned, there's no change. All day long across the city, voters are putting their ballots through the machine. Each time it goes through, it's taking an image of the ballot, and I'll go through that later in the presentation. At the end of the 8 o'clock close of polls, the poll supervisor has an electronic key they put up to the machine, and they close the poll. And it asks, are you sure you want to close the poll? They say yes. At that point, the machine stops taking ballots. It then prints out any number of results tapes of all the races and all the candidates and their total votes. Usual procedure is that's hung up on the wall for the scrutineers and everybody to look at. And then the machine is taken by one of the supervisors, is taken back to City Hall. At City Hall, there's a plastic seal on the memory card. The clerk checks the seal, cuts the seal, pulls out the memory card, inserts it into a laptop with our results tally software on it, and uploads that result. If everything's okay, they publish that result, and it uploads then onto your website, so people at home can be watching the results come in at home. That can be projected in chambers for the press and for candidates to watch. So those results are coming in, and usually for a city of this size, 8:45, 9 o'clock, you would have your results in. So that's basically how the system works in terms of the voter and how results are accumulated at the end. It also has features for accessible voters. So for voters who can't negotiate a paper ballot, it's integrated into the machine. So some machines can have this add-on component for accessible voting. Some machines don't have it. So it depends on how many you want to have. It allows a voter to listen to an audio ballot with headphones. And the machine can be used by voters who marked the ballot by hand at the same time. So you could have both voters, accessible voter and regular voter who marked by hand, are using the machine at the same time. The accessible voter would have headphones. They might be 10 feet away from the machine that's in the polling location. You could have a chair and an office divider to give them some privacy. There's different devices we have. We have a handheld device. I have some samples here. You can use a sip and puff device, paddles device, and the accessible voter goes through the audio ballot and marks the candidates they wish to vote for. At the end, the system prints a ballot out of an integrated printer that's next to the machine, and the ballot comes out, and the ballot looks like it's been marked by hand. The actual vote marks on there are random images of human-made marks that we've stored on the machine. So when that ballot comes out, it goes in the secrecy folder and then is scanned through the scanner. Basically, why that is that if there was ever a recount, and there's one accessible voter who used that machine, people would all know how they voted if it was an automated mark. But we have a camouflage mark, so when you put that ballot out, you'll never know a machine made that ballot. So the accessible voting groups like this because it guarantees their privacy. We talked about how we have a real-time web-based results display on election night. So as tabulators are coming back to City Hall and the clerk is releasing the results, that is uploaded to the internet. People at home can be clicked on and watching in real time, seeing the results come in. So at 8:01, the advanced machine results come in. 8:10, the first poll comes through, that is released. So it's a real-time upload of information. That could be, again, projected in chambers for press and for candidates. People at home can watch it, and it's interactive, so they can say what's going on in Ward 1, what's going on in Ward 2, what's going on in these races. They can choose and click and watch the results come in. So I know the city is interested in that public display of results. Talk a bit about the audit trail behind the system. Basically, you have a paper ballot. So this is touched by the voter, marked by the voter, you have paper ballots. So that is the ultimate audit trail. The machine all day long, when it's taking a scan, is taking a digital image of the ballot, and it's stored on two redundant memory cards inside the machine. On the image, as it goes through its scans, it takes an image of the ballot exactly the way the ballot is, and across the bottom of the image, the system writes the interpretation that it got at the moment of scan of what the votes were. So as it goes through each marking position on the image, it looks for blackened pixels, marks that the voter has made. If that pixel count is above a certain threshold, as defined by the officials, it's a vote. It then puts on the audit trail on the bottom, so you can always trace back exactly how the machine counted that ballot and why it counted. So after the election is over, in recount situations, you have the paper ballot touched by the voter. You have an image of every ballot, and that's a database, those images, so you can go through the images and say, let me see all the information, all the ballots that are overvotes, all the blank ballots, you can pull that information up as needed. And on every image, it has a full written assessment of why the machine calculated those results. So you have a full audit trail after the fact. I know the city was interested about results tracking by poll. The system allows you to do that for each sub-poll, like within a voting division, that when you hand the ballot over, the ballot clerk will mark on a matrix. You see in the right corner there is a matrix. We have different types of matrix depending on the numeric system for each municipality. But the ballot clerk will mark on the sub-poll or poll of that voter and hand over the ballot. The ballot's then marked in secrecy by the voter, scanned, and the system then tracks those results against that poll. So when the election's over, you can report by results by municipality, by ward, by voting location, right down to individual polls. So you'll get that level of result tracking after the election. So the overall benefits of the system are you get across the city, all ballots are counted exactly the same way. There's rules on every tabulator, so it's mathematical and it'll count it exactly the same way. So you're going to get accurate, objective, and quick results. There's no human subjectivity in the results. It's transparent, as you saw with the audit trail. You have the ballot, you have an image of the ballot, and on every image you have how the machine interpreted the votes on the ballot and why. So you have full, transparent, audible results after the fact. You require less staff because you don't have to hire them for the count. So at the end, the machine, as soon as the polls close at 8:01, the machines are reporting the results. And you don't have to train your staff so much because they don't have to be trained to do the count. The machine will give you an automated count. There's no change to the voter. As I showed, it's just a paper ballot with a pen. You mark it, and instead of putting it in the ballot box, it's being put into a scanner that drops in the ballot box. So as far as the voter is concerned, there's no change. There's features that are optional features but are well used across Canada in municipal elections. The system can alert the voter on conditions of overvote. If they vote for, let's say, two mayor votes, it's going to alert on that. They can override it, but it alerts them in case they've made a mistake. They put their pen down, made a dot in one candidate's name, and then scribble in the bubble below it. That may cause an overvote. They get a chance to correct that, or they can cast as is. Same with blank ballots. Sometimes people think they circle the name or underline the name and not fill it in the target position. Again, they don't lose their vote. The system will alert, and it can be even given back to the voter, or the voter can cast as is. So you have that alert, but the voter can override. Also, if there's unclear marks, they put small markings in the target position. You're not quite sure of their voter intent. The system, again, will warn them that and alert them that there's not a clear picture of voter intent. And you can have whatever management rules to discuss the vote with the voter as you give the ballot back to, please look at this ballot and consider perhaps darkening the marks to show your voter intent. For the accessible voting, it offers a private and independent voting solution. The current method is that you would bring someone, if you can't navigate the paper ballot, you would bring someone along and they would swear in and do it for you. The system allows true, private, independent voting for people who can't negotiate a paper ballot. And we have vote anywhere options, which is an optional, depends on the municipality, but you have the ability to open up the city to vote anywhere. So you, with your voter list on a computer attached to the internet, and our tabulators in every poll, and the paper ballots in every poll, anyone can go anywhere and vote. And this is a convenience issue that's been well received in other Ontario municipalities we've tried it. So that's basically my overview of the system. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Also, I plan to, if anyone wants to see the machine after, I can just wheel it over here and plug it in, and we can run some ballots if you're interested after the meeting.
Thanks very much, Mr. McKinstry. I appreciate the information. Any members of council? Oh, is Mr. Henry doing a presentation as well? Okay, we're available for questions now. Thank you. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a great report. Really appreciate it. A lot of detail. I have a number of questions. Some of them I just want to make sure I understand the process. Some of them are just observations. The clerk made a reference to specialty polls, but there's no reference in this report to the polls that would normally be held in long-term care facilities and retirement homes, and I'm wondering how that's going to be addressed.
There is a provision in the report that does address the situation, which would be as it has been in the past. In other words, we would have teams of polling officials going to pre-designated retirement homes, nursing homes, We've negotiated that with the management of the homes. Now, they will not have with them if council approves a tabulator election process, they would not have a tabulator with them. They would collect the ballots in a secure manner, and they would be brought back to City Hall, and they would be inserted into the spare tabulator at the end of the evening, at 8 o'clock, just shortly after 8 o'clock. So essentially, situation identical to what has traditionally been the case.
Okay, yeah. And another question is around proxy voting or special ballot voting for people who are entitled to vote here but aren't able to attend. How is that?
Proxy voting would occur as normal. There would not be any change.
So I would get a ballot that I would be entitled to cast for someone who's not here, same as
Yes,
before.
provided you're properly appointed and sworn in, and
Right.
you would vote in your own right if you're there to do that, or then you would go through again and you would vote as a proxy. So it would be a similar process.
So there's a voter card barcode that's scanned if I bring my voter card, although that's not required. But if I bring it, that barcode is scanned. Is there any link between the barcode on my voter identification card and the barcode on the ballot that I'm given?
I would say, I'd probably defer to our expert. But,
Yeah, no, they're completely different systems. So one, there is no barcode on the ballot. I mean, the barcode, it's basically a ballot style. So if it's a Ward 1 English public ballot, it's the only code on the ballot. When someone's struck off the voter list, that's all about knowing who they are and striking them off the list and looking at identification, and that's done. And then you hand them a ballot, which is a random ballot. There's no tie, and it's totally anonymous after that. There's no possible tie. And again, the barcode is not numeric. It's just an identification of the barcodes of the ballot style. Let's say a Ward 1 English public ballot.
Thank you. On the issue of what you call as an overvote or blank ballot, and the machine tells you, is that standard in all the municipalities that you're dealing with this?
It's the norm, yes. It's the norm in Canadian municipal elections. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't go through and say what the rules are on a provincial level, but it is norm. We don't have any clients who don't do it, and but it's purely up to the officials. We turn it on or turn it off.
Sure.
So pretty well everybody now, the standard across Canada in a municipal election would be it alerts on overvotes, it alerts on blank ballots, it does not alert on undervotes because lots of people undervote. And if it fails any one of 400 logic tests in a split second when you put the ballot in, it's coming back out again because the system has to be sure that's a ballot, not a photocopy, not a counterfeit. So that is the norm, but there is no official regulation. It's up to each municipal official to decide what they want to do there.
The reason I asked that question is with the typical paper ballot that's folded and put in the box. Rarely, but occasionally, there are voters who wish to register a protest vote by marking their ballot in some way that's inappropriate. And I've seen them, because I've been involved in elections. So if I choose to enter a blank ballot as a protest vote, my anonymity is gone, in the sense that if I in a traditional manner don't mark a ballot, put a blank ballot in, or mark an X for everybody or something, then I've made a protest vote. I feel I've made a protest vote. I realize it has no impact at all, but some people do that. But if the machine's going to spit it out and say to me, well, you didn't mark this correctly, that takes away the anonymity from an individual who might wish to do that. So that's an observation, and I just wonder if that's ever been addressed.
Perhaps I can try to respond initially, and then maybe John might want to answer as well. But aware of that circumstance. In terms of researching with our colleagues, so we talked about how they handle those kinds of situations, and it is a decision that each municipality can take. And it was mentioned in the report that I did have an opportunity at the last provincial election to be trained on similar equipment, including the accessibility components, and it was rare that ballots would come back, but they if they did, then the training then was, and if we do this, it would be consistent, I'm sure, here as well, that you do it as privately as is possible.
Okay.
The elector can just give you the secrecy folder and then be gone if they're in a hurry. The training that I had, and I think what would be encouraged, is that you want them to have a look to see that their ballot's actually going in the box. Because in the traditional paper system, they can't physically put it in the box either. The DRO has to do it, but they want to see it going in. Similarly with the secrecy folder, they want to see that it's going in.
Right.
So on those rare occasions where the system will see that there's an overvote or a blank vote, the machine's going to indicate that. And then there's a discussion that can happen. It'll depend on the circumstance, and the person may say, no, I know what I'm doing, just let it go. And in that case, there's a green button there that says, cast, and it's done.
I mean, it's a philosophical issue that has been talked about many times. For every person who, let's say, has written on the bottom, I don't like any of these candidates, and it beeps, you also have people who have made mistakes or are honestly trying to vote. So there's no answer. And I'm representing technology, not theory, so I can only say that it can do it one way or the other, and it's up to the officials to decide. But that's really the question. There's people who are doing that, and there's people who are making mistakes. And what's the balance? And that's really up for the officials to make that decision. But you are correct, and that has been mentioned before. And each municipality has to make their decision of what they feel is right.
Well, on that, I'm really interested in the philosophical discussion, because I appreciate there are 2 points, but it just struck me because that's not an opportunity that's been available in the traditional sense. The last item I want to raise, and I can appreciate the difficulty of finding accessible locations around the city, and I appreciate that I believe the Alliance Church is the only facility in the southeast quadrant that really works, but there is an issue there that I've been made aware of in the past, in that the entrance that virtually all electors use is at the rear of the church adjacent to the parking lot. The accessible entrance is off by itself at the front. And in an ideal world, people who have accessibility issues or mobility issues should not have to use a separate entrance to a facility than people who are accessing it. So that's something that I'm not sure that there's an answer to, but it's just something that I think we need to be aware of. There were, in the federal election before the last federal election, there were some significant problems where poll sites that were said to be accessible had people who used mobility devices being directed to really inappropriate routes to get in, and that caused a lot of distress. So I just think that we need to be aware of that when we select that location. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, I think through the city clerk, I think we could probably provide some background information to help alleviate that concern.
Yeah.
We, when we went to that location, actually acknowledged that exact issue, that the location that's closest to the room that we would be using for elections has a staircase beside it. Both of the entrances are off the parking lot. The parking lot runs along the length of the building with an entrance at either end, but it's sloped. So the entrance closest to the room has stairs and the other one doesn't. However, if we have people that are coming and want to socialize and we have queues for people coming in, we actually thought it would be preferable for everybody to be using the entrance that would be the accessible entrance, because then they're actually coming into that hallway where we can be greeting them and bringing them into the room. We don't want to use the staircase entrance for anyone.
Well, that would be an appropriate response, but that's one of the challenges with that location.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. A couple of my questions that I had down have been asked and answered, and thank you. And the other thing is, I have used this system, and it's wonderful. It's easy. You just feed your paper in and it's done. It's the easiest thing in the world. I'm going to move that recommendation now that we deal with that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Use the to forward a bylaw to adopt poll location optical scan tabulators for use in 24 poll tabulator count.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor then. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Question for Mr. Henry. The locations, you have 5 locations listed here. How does that compare to, with your knowledge, to the provincial elections or federal elections? How many locations do they have in the city? Do you know that?
Well, I did check with the provincial election, and they're upwards of 13 to 15 locations. Now, in talking with the returning officer about that, they're essentially limited to a paper ballot process at this point. Now, they did use tabulating equipment for advance voting at the last provincial election, and there's some discussion, of course, related to moving that. I think it was very successful. I haven't heard that they're going to be doing that. It doesn't sound like the returning officer has that information at this point, if it was to be a call soon. So they're limited for that reason. And I'm not sure what I would imagine the federal might be something similar to their situation. But as was mentioned in the report, all of our comparator municipalities that we've talked to at length have indicated that they really had some logistical issues, but we've got the benefit, frankly, of their experience and knowing our electors. We think it would certainly work, and in fact, we've accounted for an additional location more than what we probably really at minimum would need, which would be 4. So we're recommending 5. So we think it should work well.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple more questions. Councillor Lemon and then Councillor Body.
I thank you all for an excellent report on this. It's very thorough. The only question I've got is, what's the walking distance to the polls? Owen Sound is a city of hills. And are we going to make sure that if I live in the valley, I vote in the valley? And within walking distance.
Councillor Lemon, I'm going to ask the clerk if you could just pop that map back up. I think you were out of the council chamber during this part of the presentation, and this will show you the proposed voting or polling stations.
And if I may comment as well, we've alluded to it in the report. We'd be talking about it at subsequent meetings with council, but there's an option for vote anywhere,
right?
Which would provide some additional benefits to electors who may be working on that day and could vote at a poll closer to where they would be working or where they may be shopping or visiting or what have you. So there's that opportunity, and we're also suggesting that we could expand our advance vote dates. Traditionally, there have been 2. We've included in the budget 4 opportunities, and we're mindful too to the timing of those. And of course, council will have to approve those in any event. But so there would be other opportunities for people to get to the polls and vote in a manner that's convenient to them and at their own time.
Certainly accessible for all individuals. Councillor Body.
Thank you. Mr. Henry, in the past we've had X number of stations around town. I don't know, you'll know, I don't remember how many. You're talking about our ability as a voter to watch the person put our vote into the box. Now we're going to be doing it in only 5 boxes. Is there a backlog? Are people lined up waiting to put their ballot in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when there's rushes? What happens in other cities? Is there delay?
Well, it's about a 4 or 5 second process for that ballot to be entered into the box, and the way other communities have dealt with it and what we are anticipating is that we will have a sufficient number of places for staff to process, to give the ballot to people, and there may be a bit of, between that 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock timeframe where it's quite busy, the possibility for maybe a bit of a line, not in any significant time, but what's been the experience is most people want to see their ballot go in, and they're not unhappy if they have to wait for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm not suggesting that there will be lineups all day long. There won't be, but people will not be unnecessarily delayed. It's a relatively quick process, 5 seconds or less.
Yeah, we find usually the bottleneck would be the handing out of the ballots and the striking off, and because it really takes 5 seconds. So someone walks up, done, walks away, next one walks up. So it's usually parking lot, coming through the door, striking off the list, giving the ballot. Those tend to be the bottlenecks, not the machine. That's our experience.
Kristen.
Yes, please.
Just speaking to Councillor Body, with respect to people coming into the polls, we are going to have a number of stations. When you have the manual count and you have the paper, people are divided by alphabet, and if you end up with somebody in front of you, you have to wait. With the computer system, it's sort of like Walmart. The next clerk that can help you will be able to help you. So we know from our comparator municipalities that those kinds of abilities with the computer speed up the processing. Also, you don't flip through the papers to find McManaman. You type in MC, or you put the wand over your
Nobody
card.
can spell that anyway.
Exactly. We don't have to in the system. So if you put in MC, all of the MCs come up and you can pick. So there are options to speed that process as well.
Okay.
If I may, Your Worship, just I don't sense that there are any more questions. I'd just like to take the opportunity to mention that I did have a healthy degree of skepticism when I took the contract on in terms of looking at the newer options that are available, because of course the city has been traditional in terms of the paper ballot. But in talking with a lot of my fellow conservative peers out there who've moved to the system, they can't say enough good things about it, and it serves their communities well, from the electors to the staff to everybody that's involved. It does work, and works very well.
Thank you. One more question, Councillor Lemon.
As councillor, I just made you a councillor. Former clerk.
Considerable demotion.
Yeah, demotion again, yeah. Glenn, one of the things that's going to be rather interesting is I'm looking forward to this, is I covered elections as a reporter, and they went on and on and on.
Things do that.
And now, with the result coming in at 9:30, it could make a heck of a change in how they do the programming on these, because the municipalities that don't go to this fast system, they're still going to go on and on and on, but Owen Sound voters will know what has happened without having to go to bed and wake up the next morning. Thank you for a good report.
We can only hope we wake up the next morning. That's what we want. Thank you so much. Thank you for this very involved presentation, and we do have a motion on the floor. Further discussion for council? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you both so much, and thank you to the clerk for such a detailed report. Thank you. We are moving on to item 12B2. This is a report from the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism with regards to the 36th Street East Road Allowance. Now, what's council's direction on this item, please? Councillor Penton?
I would move the recommendation that we retain the unopened boundary road for current and future infrastructure needs, and to let the municipality of Meaford know about that.
Okay, that's the motion. Councillor Wright, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions. And when you take a look and you go to the property, there's no indication there that that's an unopened road allowance, or that's a place for people to get to the water at all. And it seems to me that this is another case of wanting to build a road that goes nowhere, quite frankly, like up on the East Hill, where there were lots that we could have had, but we don't have them. So I guess I'm questioning, first of all, what is the size of this? We own part of it and Meaford owns part of it. Is that the situation? It's an unopened road allowance between Owen Sound and Meaford, so
Right.
It's a shared boundary line.
Boundary road. And my understanding, talking to the city lawyer, is that it's not really, it's not that we go halfway, you jointly own it.
we jointly own it.
Right.
So it would have to be a case of Meaford agreeing with Owen Sound in order
Absolutely.
to sell it.
Right.
And does Meaford want to keep this as an unopened road allowance?
I've not spoken to Meaford.
You haven't spoken to
No.
Meaford?
Strictly based on our speaking with the operations department in terms of the infrastructure that's in the.
Yes, and I see that that's the wishes of our city engineer, that we keep this for whatever. I'm not going to support it. We hired somebody to find these properties for us, to get rid of them. We've got a piece of property here, and to me, again, as I said, keeping this property is like keeping a road that goes nowhere, so I'm not going to support that motion.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Director of Operations for some background on this. Mr.
Yeah, I
Roberts.
think it's just important for council to be aware of the fact that there is existing infrastructure in that road allowance. It consists of a storm sewer that's used to drain, I believe, the county road, as well as there's a blow-off valve from our water system that will release pressure periodically, and during flushing periods will route through that stormwater system as well. So there are existing infrastructure there, and there is always the potential, particularly with what I would classify as the northeast area, that with development going on there, there might be the need for a master stormwater plan there. If this land was released, then it could jeopardize or increase our costs and certainly complicate any potential development in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Then I have another question. How much of this property did these people want to purchase? The whole thing or just part of it?
Originally, the letter that we received was for a partial to build an addition onto their house, and that was the one letter that was written, and we had talked to them, and we had that discussion with our group as well, whether a portion of it could go, but.
So there can't be a portion of it sold, is that what I'm hearing?
That was the development team's review, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question, Mr. McRoberts. The future master drainage plan for this area, is there one in the works now, or one planned to be in the works for that area?
I'm just basing it upon what I understand as being some potentials that are happening in that general area, and based upon the topography of the area there, it's a natural point of discharge for a stormwater system if that area was ever developed, depending upon, it is zoned for certain purposes now. I know there's some discussions about some other opportunities. There is a future potential for the need for a stormwater servicing in that area, and if so, that is a natural outlet.
But currently, there is no plan now to look at that area to determine if that is the exact point. There's no plan right now.
That's correct. None of our east side servicing plans have looked at the stormwater servicing for that area.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, there is another issue associated with this. At this point in time, that unopened road allowance, or whatever you want to call it, is access to the waterfront for people to go down to the bay. And I don't think there's any other public access points in that immediate area. I stand to be corrected on that, but if memory serves me, there isn't any other unopened road allowances down to the water in that area.
All I know is was told that the public, I don't know to what degree or what public, but the public has access and is aware that they access the water from that point.
Okay, did somebody move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Penton. Councillor Wright.
Just a comment. If you're driving down the highway, it looks like it's a grass piece of property that belongs to two houses, and nobody's ever used it to get to the water because they do think it's public property. There's nothing there that says this is a road allowance and can be publicly accessed.
Right.
Okay, further discussion to the motion. Thanks very much for your comments and presentation on this. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report 12B3. This is a report on the 19th Street West vacant property. And this is essentially a request that staff is asking for budget consideration for the 2014 budget for an environmental impact study and an appraisal of the property to determine the feasibility of developing the lot. It's council's direction on this. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you. I would move the recommendation that we request staff to budget for an environmental impact study and appraisal of the property.
It's the only way to find out. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have another report with regards to a property at 6th Avenue West, and this is information on the 2300 block lots.
Yeah, Your Worship, that was, council had asked for more information on the cost. We had, the previous meeting had indicated that it was more than the value of the property.
Yeah.
And so it's because of the horizontal drilling that would be required because of the hazard land.
The motion is to receive. Councillor Penton? All
To receive?
further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report on the we're getting another building. A predecessor in the year of my birth signed this that has us, the city of Owen Sound, taking back the jail now that it's no longer being used as a jail for the, at the time, I'm sure what seemed like a large amount of money, which leads me to more questions, however, $5,000. Reluctantly, the recommendation is Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you. I just wonder if we'd be in a legal position if we refused to do this.
Well,
what happens if we don't accept it?
City manager.
Just ask.
Ms. Corsi, city manager, there are empty cells there, and I'm not quite ready to go into one of them. However,
Mr.
Ms.
Curtis
Corsi,
is
maybe.
much older than I am. We've had legal advice that the agreement is in full force and effect, and we have little choice. I certainly tried hard not to get it back, but wasn't successful.
Okay. Further discussion. Councillor Twaddle.
Well, I'm not really happy that we have to accept it, but I do accept that we don't have much alternative. My bigger concern, though, is we've got this piece of property coming. It's not in very good condition. The province really didn't, in recent years, do a whole lot to maintain it. My concern is that we're taking the building. What are we going to do in terms of developing a plan, hopefully to move it on to somebody else who can find a creative reuse of the property? But more importantly, until that happens, what are we going to do to make sure that we maintain the property so that it doesn't deteriorate further? And we have not set an exemplar example with the adjacent old courthouse, which is in equally distressed condition. And I just, I hesitate to say that, you know, we're taking on another historic heritage building. I'm not sure, is the building designated, or is it just on the register? Is it on the register? Yeah. But we're taking on another property that we can't afford, and I would just be appalling if it sat there and allowed to become more derelict. So I don't know whether there's a plan to bring this forward at budget time or how we're going to deal with that.
If I could, it's the strangest thing. I've taken people in there, toured them around, and they never come back.
The problem is you're letting them out.
It is a major concern, and is one that I'm not sure we have a lot of solid answers to today. And I haven't been in very recently, but I am concerned that it may almost be getting to the point that you can't take people in. So Steve and I will certainly put our minds together on this, but it is not going to be easy. I don't want to kid anyone on this. This is a challenging property to move.
And I certainly appreciate that, but I hate to see it fall to the back of everybody's mind and
Your Worship, the next steps will be to put together a bit of a marketing package and to decide how we want to, whether it's a call for proposals and to join it with the court property. That was one of the things that was hindering, a better use of the court building was because of the jail and the razor wire. So that's gone, but it is an interesting property. And as the city manager points out, we have had a number of interested parties go through, and even if I ask them to give me a creative idea, they just kind of shake their head. The jail building is very solid and doesn't lend itself to
Getting out.
Well, or an alternative use that comes to mind. Sure. I mean, the cells are not very big, and so.
It would be of interest, I think, to many people in the community, and understanding that it is possibly no longer safe for people to walk through, that a video tour could be put together, or a slide deck could be put together and uploaded onto the city website. There's an awful lot of curiosity in the community. People would like to see in there, and they would like to get out again. So there's a healthy curiosity, I think, in the community to have a look, barring physical tours. I think a virtual tour would certainly be something that our IT staff, I'm sure, is more than capable of putting together. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm going to make what may appear to be an outrageous suggestion. Well, I'm very serious. We have a huge number of creative people in Owen Sound and in this area. And might it not be appropriate to, in the form of a public meeting or some other method, to invite public input? Because somewhere, I'm sure somebody has got a use for old jails. We're not the only one. I think we're in agreement that we probably don't want it as another museum. I didn't get anything thrown at me, that's amazing. But I think there may be some other creative use. I don't know what it is. If I had an answer, believe me, I'd give it to you. But to encourage, if we could find some methods before we start looking for a request for proposal and spend a lot of money, let's listen to the community, because maybe somebody out there has got some idea for its use that's quite practical. I don't know, but hey, it's worth a chance. It's a lot better than having it sit for the next 25 years as the old courthouse county building has sat. I think we should listen to the public. I mean, it doesn't cost us a lot, and it could save us a lot.
Certainly open to any and all ideas when it comes to that and other buildings, but that one in particular. So.
Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Your Worship. As we head into budget season in the next few weeks, and we look at our cut from our provincial grant, and we look at our costs continually going up, taking on another building that we are not caring for now, that's in our care, and not putting any budget into it, it does not make sense to extend it to a back building and call it a historic thing and start to figure out how we're going to manage it, because we just don't have the ability. I would hope that we would get an appraisal on it that's realistic, fair market value, and put the thing in the market and hope we get more than $5,000 for it. I do know people that I talk to in my line of work that are interested in, once it came into the city, title came to us, that they would be interested in putting together a proposal. Talk's cheap, we'll see if they do, but I hope that we look pretty quickly at getting rid of it. We just can't afford. How many years did it take us to put a roof on here? It was a 25-year lifespan on the roof of here, and we waited 48 years to do it because we didn't have a budget.
It took 8 feet of the ceiling to fall in.
We can't afford the buildings we've got, and adding another building that is, frankly, there's not a darn thing you can do with it. It just does not make sense to me. So I hope we get rid of it quickly.
Very good. We do have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And I would strongly echo Councillor Boddy's comments. We have the Owen Sound Salmon Tour, which is quite fascinating in that on the weekend there was a large, very, very large group of Asian tourists wandering about, taking photographs of the salmon tour and the riverbanks and so on. So it was quite neat to see this really coming together nicely. So we have a brief presentation. Welcome, Paulette.
Thank you. And you're right. I've been taking a lot of trips down there, and it's amazing the groups that are coming from all over.
Thank you.
So the Owen Sound Salmon Tour, what is it? By now, most of you have heard, but it's a brand new tourism program that we've developed this year with Owen Sound Tourism in partnership with BruceGraySimcoe.com, also known as the RTO7, to extend and enhance the fall shoulder season. It's a draw for visitors from the GTA and southwestern Ontario, we're seeing a lot of both, who are likely to stay for 3 or 4 hours on this tour and enjoy a meal, shop, visit attractions, or even stay overnight, increasing tourism receipts in the city. That's the whole idea. It's recognized as a regional attraction, and it's been promoted as a regional, unique offering on the Grey Bruce Adventure Fall microsite. And I just heard this morning it's the second most popular page that's being visited on that Fall microsite. It's also successfully piquing the interest of people visiting Inglis Falls. It's drawing them into Owen Sound in a big way. Inglis is receiving roughly between 300 and 400 visitors per weekend in the fall, and many are taking the salmon tour from there. I've been up in Inglis Falls just last weekend. There was a gentleman there from Germany saying, "Where can I see the salmon?" I saw that is very, very encouraging. And as I say, visitors from around the world, including Holland, Israel, and the US, are asking about the salmon there. This is a tour that you can hike, cycle, or paddle. It's very active, family-based tour. And we provide a map that gives more details on how you can take the tour. Highlights of the tour include the harbor, the Tom Thompson Art Gallery, the Farmers Market on Saturdays, the Mill Dam and Fish Ladder, of course, Harrison Park, the spawning channels that are behind the Grey Sauble Conservation Office, and also Inglis Falls itself. We've developed some products to go along with the tour. There's 5,000 brochures that Steve can give you some copies soon. We just got them last week, and I was happy to see as well the Ontario Tourism Office in Barrie has requested 1,000 copies themselves to hand out to other tourism offices right around the province. We have 3 new interpretive plaques that have been installed at the Mill Dam and the Fish Ladder, Harrison Park, and at the Grey Sauble spawning channels. And we have 3 videos also in the works. We've commissioned a local videography. One is already done, and 2 more. He's out there filming, not as we speak, but probably tomorrow. This is our new website, greatsalmontour.com, we've called it. And it's been very successful so far. Some of our statistics here. It was launched in August, and since then, that's been not even a month and a half, we've gotten over 4,000 page views and close to over 2,000 visits at this point. I was very encouraged to see that about half the visits are from people in the GTA and southwestern Ontario, which I think is excellent. We had a Google ad campaign, $1,500 spent so far to promote the website. And a lot of our Facebook posts, we've been very active in different social media channels, and some of the posts have been shared 20 to 30 times, which is very good on our site. The salmon tour teaser that we posted on YouTube is also getting a lot of hits. This is one of the pictures that was on Facebook. It's always great to get a salmon jumping, and what was really encouraging about this is it was taken by one of our city staffers on her lunch break who just went down to the mill dam, got excited, and forwarded it to us in tourism. So anybody who's down there, I really encourage you to send us any of your videos or photos as well. And if you haven't already seen the video, I'd like to play it for you. That's our teaser.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. We'll see everybody at the Mill Dam or along one of our inner city rivers.
Yes.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. The kids and I were down to Harrison Park last weekend. We biked down from our house, and they wanted to know what all these signs were about, and I was taking them down to show them the salmon anyway. And I grew up very close to the Sydenham River. We went down, but the Salmon Run, which is an absolutely amazing and spectacular natural phenomenon, we pretty much take for granted because it happens every year for weeks on end. The amount of people who were down at Harrison Park last weekend was astounding. I have never seen so much expensive camera equipment as I had seen that weekend. There were people lined up on either side of the river and on the bridge with telescopic lenses and tripods and stuff. I don't even know what any of it was for, but I have never seen that before. And I thought and I actually had somebody, a resident, who stopped me to say something nice, which, trust me, in the last little while has not happened very often, and said, whoever came up with this idea, it was brilliant. And so I would like to pass that on. This is a great little tourism promotion. I mean, I think we just take these things for granted because we live here. But people are really, really interested in this. And I know being able to capture all of those people who come to Ingalls Falls. Several years ago, when we had sort of just a tourism committee, we were talking about the fact that people come up to Ingalls Falls, and many of them don't even know that just down the road there's Owen Sound.
That's right.
They just come to Ingalls Falls. They have a map. It shows them how to get to Ingalls Falls. They look at Ingalls Falls. They get in their car and they drive back to Burlington or wherever they're coming from without even knowing we're here. This is great, and I just want to pass that on to.
Thank you.
To tourism.
Terrific. Councillor Penton and Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I wanted to echo that. I don't live far from the mill dam, and it's packed. Morning, noon, night, whatever. There's just so many people there, and local people. And what I really like about this is that it really is people walking through town and biking and people on the river. It's really, really been very, very well received, I think, for our community, for people in the community, but also lots of people from outside. It's been busy. We've had visitors from Switzerland the last week, and we've been down every day to see the fish.
Lovely.
So there's a great interest.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
Well, I think this is great. I think a fantastic job has been done. For those of us who've lived here for a few years, the tradition of going to the mill dam to see the fish jump. But it points out just how crucial the Harbor River Mill Dam, Harrison Park area is. Because this is the kind of thing you don't find. I mean, if you see fish that close to the surface in, say, in the Hamilton Harbor area, it's probably because they're dying off from toxic things that are in that bay around Burlington. But this is a really natural thing, and the people, I think over time, what you've started here is going to escalate even more. And we're going to have a problem, which I would love to have, is no parking room at the Ingalls Falls, Harrison Park, and the Mill Dam. Wouldn't that be a wonderful problem because there's so many tourists here?
I've almost seen that. At the Mill Dam in Ingalls Falls, I don't mean a problem, but it's been full a couple of the weekends we've had lately.
But I mean, it's going to become fuller.
Mhm. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and this great initiative. It's super. It really is for the city. Thank you.
Great.
And like the salmon, they do put on some miles. We're going to now go to report 12B7, which is from our Human Resources Director, which is on the mileage policy of the city. And this is based on the use of personal vehicles. I believe this is coming in line more with the County of Grey's policy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's council's direction on this? Councillor Wright?
I will move the recommendation that in consideration of the report from the Supervisor of Human Resources, that we rescind the policy's mileage expense and direct staff to implement the attached policy, which is the use of personal vehicles for city business.
Thank you. To the motion, Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I was just going to ask, when was this going to be implemented? Would this be starting in the new year and be part of this year's budget? Would it be a January start?
Oh, immediately.
Immediately.
Okay. And we don't know exactly the implications financially, it's just that it's not too much, is what it says here.
I'll go to the Director of Financial Services. Is there any, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I'll go to Ms. Humphreys. If there's any indication in terms of a budgetary impact of any scope.
Through you, Your Worship, it's difficult to estimate because we don't track mileage separately. But certainly for this particular quarter, we're talking about a difference of 4 cents per kilometer. I have discussed the matter with finance, and we're not anticipating it would make any sort of significant difference to the budget. But there would be an increase, clearly.
Perhaps maybe you could just give us a brief overview in terms of the background, just very briefly, the policy today and how it will change.
The current policy is for 44 cents per kilometer for all travel done on behalf of the city. What this policy will do is we will be following the county model, which is to, on a quarterly basis, we'll evaluate based on the Ontario index for price of gasoline. We'll evaluate, and there's a chart that's included in the policy, and then we will determine what, based on what that index is, what the mileage will be for that quarter. And that'll be, so 4 times a year we would take a look at the index, and then we'll take a look at, and there's a formula, and we will determine what the rate will be. So for the period right now, which we're in, of July 1st to September 30th, well, I guess we are actually out of that, till when I wrote the report, it would be 48 cents per kilometer. Okay. And this rate has not changed since 2007.
Right.
And as we all know, gas has gone up quite significantly since that period of time.
It does seem to fluctuate quite regularly. Yeah.
And what this would do is keep into account any fluctuations both up and down. So
that's important to note.
Yes, yeah. But there is a base rate of 45 cents per kilometer, which would never go below that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
It's just, we seem to spend a lot of time on our fiscal problems, and I just don't, didn't know why we couldn't start this on January 1st, and we'd look at it in the whole budget. That was all I was thinking about.
I'm going to go to the city manager.
I think, Council, we're talking tens of dollars, not thousands of dollars here. It's going to be a very small amount. So I'm quite confident that within the current budget, we can absorb any increase.
Thank you very much for giving us that overview. Councillor Chamberlain, any further comments?
I just wish I was ahead a bit more information. I don't know how many people get reimbursed.
To the Director of Financial Services, do you have at the tip of your fingers an overall dollar figure that would have been reimbursed to staff who use their own vehicles? I know that there was an elimination of car allowance, and I'm just struggling, helping the councillor here get the information that she may need.
Top of my head, Your Worship, and I'm being very rough with this, but total reimbursement of mileage alone, I'm sure it would be less than $10,000 total throughout the corporation.
Sure. So in terms of the scope, does that
Yes, thank you very much.
alleviate some of your concern? Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for that. Councillor Wright, I believe, moved the recommendation. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. I'll just draw council's attention to the time. We are at T1315, road salt. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move the recommendation that we award our road salt supply and tender to Cargill De-icing Technology. The lowest bid received, satisfying all the tender requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you. With the change of supplier, has our delivery system changed? We used to be able to get salt from Godrich sort of on an as-needed basis. Do we need to buy and store a whole winter supply now, or are we going to be able to get salt as we need it?
Through you, Your Worship, the contract specifically states that the supplier is required to give a certain delivery within a certain time period. I believe it's, I'm not going to say what it is, I believe it's 24 or 48 hours, but it's a fairly short time frame for delivery. We don't have the capacity to store the salt we need for the entire winter, so therefore we order it on need as basis, and we'll just order it, and within 48 hours or so it's delivered.
Okay, yeah, I just want to be sure of that, because I knew we didn't have capacity, and I didn't know if we were going to rent capacity or what the anticipation was. Thank you.
Thank you. Salt mine. We could change the name. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wondered, and I didn't see it in the report, maybe I missed it, but how does the new total price per ton of $63.57 compare with what we paid last year? Is that up, down, or sideways?
I believe that's covered off in the report, Councillor Lemon. It's down a wee bit. And I do believe, Councillor Lemon, that we're actually paying a wee bit less than Grey County, and that has a lot to do with the compact urban nature of our community. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report on GPS for winter control operations. Is this, I'm sorry to ask this question, is this for all vehicles or specifically winter control vehicles only?
Specifically for winter control vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Penton.
I'd move the motion that we approve retaining WebTech Wireless Incorporated for the GPS vehicle tracking system for winter control.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a report with a request to tender vehicles. Councillor Wright.
This is just asking permission to go to tender. I'll move the recommendation.
And considering one of these items is a snow blower, I would really be
think
supportive
so.
of a snow blower.
The sooner the better. Yes, that's.
Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. This is the report back Council asked for with regards to the Grey County draft smoke-free bylaw. Councillor McMahon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move the recommendation that we request the clerk to prepare a letter to the county with respect to the draft bylaw and include the items that are listed in the report. There were a number of items that the city has raised a few times, and I think it's important to put those on the table again for this bylaw. One additional item, if I might, I believe may have been missed in the report. We talked about them considering large regional parks as well and how to deal with them. Harrison Park, for instance. No smoking within the property of Harrison Park may be a difficult thing to look at. So if that could also be included, I would include that in the recommendation as well.
Okay. Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. There are answers to every one of our concerns. The only one that is missing is special events. And I would suggest that we, as a council, ask them to put something about special events in the bylaw, because I think it's important that our special events that we have such terrific ones. We don't want to jeopardize those by. So I just think that should go into the request that they take a look at, that we, let me see, how am I going to word this? We want something in the bylaw that deals with special events. The rest of this is handled easy.
Just for clarification, Councillor Wright, in terms of something that would provide an exemption for special events?
That's right.
Or okay.
That's right, yes. We can speak to it at county, but I think
Sure.
it should come from the city, that we should have an exemption on special events in the bylaw. And I believe that a number of municipalities have requested the same thing, so everything else we have a good answer for.
I'll have to go to the mover. This would be a friendly amendment. If,
it states in there that we'd like them to consider special events such as the Salmon Spectacular, Summer Folk, held in city parks. So, and
We didn't ask them to consider it, we just asked about it.
I'd like them to consider it. I don't think we want to prejudge. And just, that's great to hear what you're saying, that these are easily identified. We've raised them with the county at least 3 times, and 3 times they've come back with not the answer that the city has asked for. So that's great that they can be addressed, and I hope they can be. I think the city has long supported a bylaw like this. Of course, the devil's always in the details, and that's what we're talking about here. But I'm fine with including a discussion around special events. That's fine.
Please, thank you.
okay. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We report with regards to the 2013 DIA maintenance agreement. Councillor Penton.
I would move the recommendation that we receive the report about the downtown maintenance agreement with the Owen Sound DIA, and that we approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute. I think we mean the 2013 downtown maintenance agreement.
Thank you. So it is 2013 in the recommendation? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The Canadian Forces requesting some routine use of the Billy Bishop Regional Airport. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that we allow the Land Forces Base to use the Billy Bishop Airport lands for purpose of military exercises between October 27th and November 8th. Anything we can do to support our armed forces, I'm in favor of.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item is Bylaw Committee minutes. Councillor Lemon. Did you want to? Oh. No, I was speaking on the. Oh, okay. All right. We have a series of minutes. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move receipt of the minutes of the Bylaw Committee, the Cultural Advisory Committee, the Economic Development, Tourism Committee, Operations Advisory, Parks and Recreation Parks Advisory.
And is that approval? Or
yes.
Approval. Okay.
Sorry.
Is there discussion on any of the items within any of those minutes? Councillor Adair.
Well, I realize the time, Your Worship, but at our last bylaw committee meeting, we dealt with a series of very important issues around parking that council had asked us to pick a month, one meeting, to look at everything. I thought it was a very fruitful meeting. We went through item after item. We were able to go, oh, this item, if we do that, that impacts this over here. We were able to deal with it all collectively at once and not sort of tinker Pall Mall with the system. One of the things that we did find out at the DIA and others who did a walk around is that almost every parking lot in the city has different rules around how long you can stay in that lot at night, and when you have to leave, and when you have to be out in the morning. Staff was very generous about why they thought that had happened in the past, but I think the reason that had happened in the past is because council had, on one-offs, at a time, decided, oh, we're going to solve this problem here, so we're going to do this with that lot. So it was a very productive meeting. We made we've made lots of suggestions or recommendations to council. I think it was so successful that that's the way to go from here on in, is to deal with all the parking issues at one time, so we can look at the whole system.
Thank you. Councillor Penton.
Just following up on Councillor Adair's comments, I know it's very late, but there are really quite a few recommendations in terms of parking, and I'm wondering if there's some way to communicate that in its entirety, other than through these minutes, which I'm sure people aren't all going to be reading in the public. But there's a lot of changes that are being recommended. So I guess a communication strategy is what I'm looking for.
Sure. Ms. Corsi.
In the report, it does indicate the strategy that's going to be undertaken, so we're going to have an updated parking map on the website, distribution of parking policies, and an update on lot 1 to all staff via email. So we will continue to pump that information out through our website and get on to better signage, etc.
I guess the KISS principle is being implemented in this. I think, keep it simple. I won't say the last word, but I'll just say keep it simple. And I think that's right. Simple and short. Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have in camera from September 23rd, please. Thank you, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. The notices have been dealt with. We're at other business, and I will go to Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question, and I'm sure it can be answered simply. I'm sure the Bethune House lease is up now or is due to come up. Have we any plans to renew it, or what is happening there?
City Manager.
If I could, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wright, as directed by Council, we have not renewed that lease when we corresponded with the hospital many months ago in that regard. The art gallery is in discussions on potentially doing some sharing of that space on a short-term basis.
My second issue is, it has to do with transportation, but it's a nice story. Very quickly, there was an elderly lady who went up to Zares on Saturday afternoon to do her grocery shopping by bus. She did her shopping. She came out, as she says I usually do, and there was no bus. She came out at after 4 o'clock, and there was no bus. So she said, I stood and I waited and waited and waited and finally realized that no bus was going to come and pick me up. And a car pulled up beside her, and it was one of the bus drivers that recognized her as being a regular on that run. And she stopped and explained to her that the bus was not going to run past 4 o'clock, and she delivered her home. So I thought that was a pretty nice thing for that bus driver to do, and a vote of thanks should go out to her and what she did for that senior lady.
We live in a pretty amazing community.
Yes, we do.
Those are the stories that make it real. Councillor Penton.
Yes, I want the community and everyone here to know about the big 100th anniversary celebration for the Roxy Theatre on October 19th. That's a Saturday at 7:30. There's going to be a celebration of the building with a whole lot of performers, the new Owen Sound Poet Laureate, Georgian Bay Children's Choir, Look Up Theatre, school children, Coco Love Alcorn and her dad. And they're asking people who are coming to the concert to get dressed up in Edwardian dress. That will be interesting, scouring the wardrobe for that.
It'll be easy for me.
Yeah. And they are offering costume rentals this coming Wednesday from 7 to 9. So if you don't have one in your closet, Mayor Haswell, you can go over there from 7 to 9 and get yourself a costume.
Costume rental it is.
And so they're inviting everyone to come and party like it's 1913. And the tickets are really reasonable, $13 to $19.13. That's cute. But you can also get some for pay as you can at the door. Okay. So that's on October 19th. And would you indulge me with just one more little...
What time?
It's at 7:30 in the evening, Saturday, October 19th at 7:30.
Yeah, it doesn't say the time.
It doesn't say the time on the poster.
It doesn't say the time on the poster? Okay.
7:30.
7:30, right. Okay.
Carry on, Councillor Penton.
I just want people to know that on Thanksgiving Monday and for the next few days, there is going to be a group of citizens from our sister city in Dai County who will be visiting the city, not officially, but they're here to see the museum and meet with some of the other missionaries. They'll be in town, so if you see some Chinese people on tour, we will on Wednesday be taking them a little tour around the town. Appreciate Mayor Haswell and everybody else who's helping out to make them welcome, and we're hoping that they will take back good memories of Owen Sound, and it won't be the last visit from Dai County.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. I have a petition to present to you, and I'm going to make a motion that be referred to the Operations Committee. The petition concerns a problem that's developed because of changes in parking at the OSCVI, Georgian College, and elsewhere in that area. And it's 11th Avenue East, between 8th and 10th. Now, part of the problem is I went up and looked at the street. It's exceptionally narrow. There's no sidewalk. And there, according to the residents who signed the petition, of which probably 95% of the people who live on that two-block area have signed it. There's 30 so people signed it. There is concern for the children because of the amount of parking, the narrowness of the street, which is only going to get worse in the wintertime because you get snowbanks. And they have a strong concern, and I would make a motion to refer this to the Operations Committee because that's where it needs to be dealt with, and all the signatures are on. This is the original copy. It came to my house, hand-delivered, and it was a concern, so I would move my first item of other business that be referred to the Operations Committee where it belongs.
Thank you. Motion to receive and refer to Operations. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you.
And the second thing, and I'll be brief, reminding everyone that the Becketts will be at the Gordy Tap Show this Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Harmony Center, formerly Knox United Church, 890 4th Avenue East. Tickets are $20 and available at the Ginger Press and Avita Main Street Hair Salon in downtown Owen Sound. Gordy Tap, I believe at this point, is 91 or 92. Depending on which website you look on, that estimates his age. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to the Director of Community Services. I see in the bylaw that there is a bylaw to execute a site plan agreement between the city and the redevelopment of the condos at the professional center. Last time that was before council, there were some questions, disputes, and I just don't think we should let it pass without commenting on that. Could you comment further?
Certainly, through you, Your Worship, there were a few conditions related to the site plan approval, primarily relating to stormwater management on that property, and we have been able to meet with the developer, with our development team, engineering, operations and planning, and we've come to a reasonable solution that improves stormwater management and meets the developer's expectations, so we expect to be issuing building permits for that redevelopment shortly.
That is
Great
very
news.
good
Great
news.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And bylaws, please. Or moving, sorry.
Yeah, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Twaddle, the action taken in committee of the whole.
Thank you.
In considering public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given and other business be hereby confirmed by this council.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Notices of motion, we do not have any. New business by resolution, we do not have any. Bylaws.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that bylaws number 2013-181 to 2013-188 inclusive be hereby passed and enacted. 1 minute to spare.
Excellent. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried, and we are adjourned.